Good evening, everyone. My name is Pete Berube. I'm the chairperson of the Millis Finance Committee. Tonight is Wednesday, March 29th. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask everyone on the Finance Committee to introduce themselves, starting at my left.
John Lohr.
John Stedman.
Peter Underhill.
Sarah Reyes.
Jody Garson.
Joyce Boyardi.
Kathy McInnes.
Michael Crone.
Okay, and we have a few folks in the audience. I just want everybody, I'll start off by saying, please make sure, I ask that we're going over a lot of data, a lot of handouts, couple things. One, if you're, for the courtesy, of everyone and everybody's ability to hear the information, please keep the chatter and whispers to a minimum. Please step to a microphone or sit at a microphone to address anything. This is a public meeting, so we need to make sure that those that are dialed in or zoomed in or at home watching on television Millis media that they are able to hear. So please make sure you're at a mic. And then please introduce yourselves with your address if you're a Millis resident, or state otherwise if you're not. With that, we'll get started, and I'll ask Mr. James Donovan. He is the IT director. To come forward and present your budget.
Mr. Chair, point of order, we should allow the select board to call their meeting to order.
Thank you very much. Yep.
I'll make a motion that we call our meeting to order. Second? I guess. Okay, call our meeting to order. I don't know,
Okay.
I'm not the chair this year.
It's been, for those that can't hear, the select board has called their meeting to order. They do have quorum with 2 members present, so that is, as is standard. If a board has quorum at another board's meeting or committee, they are required to call their meeting to order, and they've just done so. So, back to you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jim Donovan. I'm the IT director for the town of Millis. The IT department is responsible for the technology support services of all town employees apart from the schools. In addition to all physical assets, the department oversees contractor-hosted computer services, coordinates and manages external technology vendors, such as our help desk and other support services. Project initiatives in FY24, including Azure and security improvements, cybersecurity training, e-permitting, and fiber connectivity of all town buildings. Several of these projects are funded through recently awarded grants. The total proposed budget for FY24 is consistent with the preceding year's budget, with an increase of $12,000, mainly due to software costs from the Munis, office licensing, and assessors department. I am currently a full-time employee for the town of Millis, but I only work 20 hours in the town, and I work 15 hours for the town of Norfolk as well. So I would also be looking for your recommendation to go full-time and spend all of my time in Millis to better support the rest of the town. I've never done this before, so I don't know if that's enough information or if there's more to go over.
Okay. I'll open it up to the committee for questions or comments. I would ask that you, none heard there, I would ask that you characterize where do you think those extra hours that you would spend, I mean, you're going from 15 to 35?
20 to 35.
20 to 35. Right. What do you think would be the added benefit or added service and enhancements that the town would receive?
A lot of the stuff is just not going done right now, whether it's supporting police and fire as much as they need, the library as well. I support them, so right now they get Band-Aid fixes and not longer-term goals fixed for them. Other projects, for example, and one of the grants that awarded was a fiber connectivity. So that's a $150,000 grant I received last year, but I really haven't had time to dedicate and spend the time working on it. So those type of initiatives and things to work on and complete while supporting, and also with a lot of the cybersecurity threats and requirements from insurance, for my insurance, of extra security measures we need to take. It would allow me to implement a lot of those.
Has the town had do you keep data on network outages or service outages, service interruptions currently?
I don't keep current track of it. I think if there was anything significant, I would, but there hasn't really been anything significant in that, other than maybe a power outage here or there or something like that.
How about security threats or cybersecurity type issues?
Nothing on threats. I mean, threats are all over the place, and they're they're ongoing, but we haven't been, you know, directly targeted or anything like that. However, to meet some of the goals, some of the, you know, multi-factor authentication that people talk about, we're implementing that across the board. So just trying to work on that. I have some of the town in it, some of the towns not yet, due to some of the lack of hours and being able to move that along.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Mr.
I'm going to ask
Kern.
what Mike Kaczynski's recommendation would be on this?
This is town level, not schools.
Town, yes, just that.
Right.
Thank you, Mike Kaczynski, Town Administrator. The administration strongly supports this. This is something that we have talked about for quite some time. Jim is doing an absolutely outstanding job. The problem is just bandwidth and the time he has. As he had mentioned, he's keeping us afloat, he's keeping things moving forward, but it's not at the pace we need to move. This will allow that to move forward with things, as he mentioned, and e-permitting and other things that we're trying to get going. And currently, we don't have the bandwidth for that. So this is something we're strongly supporting.
It's probably a bad analogy in this case for bandwidth.
Yes.
You're talking figurative bandwidth, I think, not the literal type. Please go ahead.
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
What are the consulting services that are currently within the budget?
Consulting services could range from anything. Most of them are going to be, or some of them are going to be with that fiber project of what the town actually needs and where we're going. So some of the things that have been done has just gotten us to where we are, but they haven't necessarily had a huge long-term plan as to what this building's going to handle and connectivity in that. So some of it's for those type of things. Unfortunately, it's tough to know exactly what they're for. We have consulting services for outside, for our help desk, for switches, for firewalls, things like that, all those type of things. So with projects coming up, it's most likely will be needed. I can't guarantee I'd use all of it. Some of it would even be for things in here. For example, getting the TV off the table. So it's not at risk of falling every meeting. So things of that nature as well.
And also, so right now, it shows the salary at 35 hours, but I don't,
Right.
I don't see it broken down as to what it actually costs Millis,
Right.
and then what that differential would be if you were to go 35 hours solely for Millis.
Amazing enough, I don't actually have those numbers directly in front of me, but basically we bill Norfolk for those 15 hours, and that money comes back into the general fund, is my understanding. So it doesn't actually directly affect my budget, but it would affect the general fund in that. So
But that would be helpful for us to know what that differential is, yeah.
Hi, Carol Johnston, Finance Director. So currently, the IT Director is fully expensed through our budget, so it's 100% in the budget. How it's refunded is through miscellaneous refunds and reimbursements through the general fund. I believe it's 43%, and the difference would be with the town, but we get reimbursed from Norfolk right now. So there's no additional expense going onto the general fund. It would just be in our reimbursement coming in on the revenue side.
It would go to zero.
On
On the
the
revenue
revenue side.
Right.
But so it's around 48,000 or so, but for the town, for expense to fit within our budget, it's already included as part of our budget at 100%.
That was my question.
As far as the consulting that Jim had mentioned, some of that consulting is required for our ongoing Munis project that we have to get the AP electronically, so we can actually have our like hotkeyed invoices against, if you were to pull up your general ledger as a department manager and want to see what a particular invoice was, you'd be able to click on a link and get that up. We don't currently have that available because Jim doesn't have the bandwidth to help us out. So that's an important point for us as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I have a request that that is the exact type of example of work that needs to be done in the specificity that I think, that I know I want. And I would like for there to be a list of, projects or initiatives or programs that extra 15 hours will get us. And the reason I ask, we should ask at any time, that we're looking to spend additional resources or allocate additional resources, because those resources are already within the budget for next year somewhere. But that with the additional budget pressure that we're under this particular year, I think it's even more important to know what the work is. So I'm looking at Mr. Kaczynski, and hopefully you can give us a list. You know, email is fine. It doesn't have to be a slide presentation. So, okay. Any more questions? Okay. Any questions from the audience? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next item, and that is the plastic bag and petitioned article discussion with Mr. McVeigh, and I know he has some help with him. Hi there.
Should I state my name since you know him?
Sure, please, thank you.
Nancy Downs, 2 Meadowbrook Road in Millis.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Good evening, Finance Committee members and Chair Berube. Tonight, we're here just to discuss the amendment to the existing plastics bylaw. As a basic summary, the amendment doesn't fundamentally change the previous bylaw. It basically tightens up the language and any loopholes that might be present in the previous version, and allows for a better explanation for businesses to understand what exactly they're allowed under the bylaw, because that was a point of confusion, apparently, regarding the old bylaw.
Okay.
And to that effect, I'd have Nancy Downs, who's representative from Oceana, who helped us develop the amendment, understood the issues with the old bylaw, and would speak to some more specific details on that.
Hi. So since this is the Finance Department, I'm not going to do the same that I did with the Select Board, because I think you're more interested in cost and the change to the businesses.
Not necessarily. So I was at the presentation on Monday. I think that was entirely appropriate for this committee, but I defer to you if
again?
we have questions.
Should I do it again?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hi, I'm with Oceana. It's an ocean conservation group based in Washington, D.C., but I live full-time here in Millis. I moved in 2020 and was very excited at Roche Brothers to see nothing but paper bags, and I thought, yay, progressive town. I don't have to do anything here in my backyard. But within a year, in 2021, my teenagers started working at Roche Brothers, and I noticed these, which were thicker plastic bags as opposed to back in the old day, we had the thin film, which is what the town of Millis banned in 2019, and that went into effect in 2020. So I got confused, and I contacted the Board of Health, and I also contacted Roche Brothers. Roche Brothers believed that this was a thicker bag, therefore not a thin film as described in the bylaw, so they thought that this was an alternative to provide their customers to safely transport their products home. But the bylaw says it must not be made of polyethylene. Sorry, there's a million different plastics, and the bag clearly states in here that it's made of polyethylene. Board of Health acted quickly, and it was very great. They issued a cease and desist, and Roche Brothers was very agreeable and understood that this was not in compliance. But we went and took a look at the bylaw and noticed that plastic bag was described like 3 different ways in the original one. And one point it was called thin film, another one it was called checkout. You know, it encouraged bags to be made available, but it said to be made of plastic or polyethylene. So there was a lot of mishmash in the language. So we wanted to just simply tighten that up so there would be no confusion, and that that customers would be encouraged to bring their own reusable bag is number one. So the argument of paper versus plastic is not the correct argument. It should be bring your own first and foremost. And then if not, have Roche Brothers provide a reusable checkout bag, which could be polypropylene or canvas or whatever that they want to provide that doesn't violate the bylaw. And then only as to me, the last would be the recyclable paper bag, because that's also a resource that we don't want to use once and throw away. And also from the perspective of finance in town of Millis, Plastic bags are a blight in the community, and the town pays for cleanup when these end up in our environment. Anecdotal story, a gentleman back here works with the trustees and said he did the town of Millis cleanup after the bag ban bylaw, after 2019, and said there was virtually no bags in the Millis Beautification Day. So he was very excited how successful the bylaw has been.
Okay.
Questions? And there are exceptions, unlike produce bags. These are, and there's a nice list, like newspaper bags and dry cleaning. So there are some thinner film bags that are still allowed, like soups and things.
As I understand it, you said that Roche Brothers is in support of, I mean, I'm not asking you to speak for them.
They've
But-
been great. They were right away,
And-
I think.
And
Agreed.
clearly,
Oh, yeah.
they're our largest, I would say, generator of bags in town.
Yeah,
But
the
there's
challenge
others,
in Massachusetts
Ace.
as a retailer is there's like over 140 municipal bylaws in the state of Mass. It would be better for Roche Brothers if there was just one state bag ban, because they have to navigate each one.
Okay.
Once again, a nice job.
Any questions? Okay,
Can we vote on
unheard.
this, or- No,
Thank
not
you.
yet.
Thank you.
Not yet.
Nancy, John, would you stay for 1 minute? Because I think you're going to give us some information on the 5G, on the citizens petition. I think we had hoped that you would give us your opinion on that.
To be honest with you, I'm not prepared for that at this time. I'd have to talk to the board
Okay.
to determine what positions are held on.
Has the board had presentation from the lead petitioner?
Currently, no.
Okay.
Possibly in April.
Okay. So, if at all possible, if you're able to do that prior to the 13th and come back to us, we would invite you back. Because it would factor into, you know, we will vote on the citizens petition. And one of the requests, after we received our presentation from the lead petitioner, was that we would like the Board of Health's opinion, one way or another, just what your take on it is.
Yeah, I can ask the chair. I mean, I know we're not meeting until the 28th of April.
Okay,
It's the 28th, yeah.
maybe an emergency session would be in order?
Yeah.
I'm joking.
No, I'll talk to the chair,
Okay.
and we've had discussions on it, don't get me wrong, but we haven't had any formal discussions with the petitioner,
Okay,
so
okay.
I don't want to speak out of line in that
Nope,
direction.
wouldn't ask you to, okay.
All righty.
Mr. Chair, relating to that, after the presentation was made, it was, I went to the planning board to get their opinion because they work with the cell towers in their opinions. And the chair, Rich Nichols, was going to forward it to town council. And I'm just wondering, it was 3-4 weeks ago, what happened with that? I haven't had an opportunity to ask anybody for an update, so,
We will make an inquiry.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay. We're slightly ahead of schedule, which is never a bad thing. We don't necessarily have the same schedule as the select board with hearing times and things like that, so I'm going to ask that the school board come forward, and we'll start a presentation on the FY24 budget.
Good evening.
Mr. Catalano, how are you?
Fine. We asked Deirdre if she could screen it, otherwise we can plug in. I don't know if she's responded yet. I will check.
Deirdre?
Feels very ominous.
Right, yeah.
Want us just to plug it? We can plug.
That's a chair voice. He saves it for special occasions.
Deirdre, could you put the slides on can you share the screen? We can't hear you.
If not, I just need a meeting.
Yeah, I did not mute, but yes, I can share the screen. I'm really sorry.
That's okay.
We'll just take the-
That's on me.
Nope,
I should
nope.
have asked earlier today.
No problem. Thank you. I think Mr. Conroy will be doing most of the dollars and figures similar to your presentation at the select board? Sure. And so the reason I ask is because I've reviewed the new slides. There's an updated slide deck. I did it at work with many distractions. I'm not an accountant. I can't make all of the new roll-up slides, which are very helpful, connect to, or I should say breakdown. I can't make the new breakdown slides connect to roll-up figures as much as possible. I would like for you to talk down to my level of understanding and help me connect the new data to the existing roll-up figures. I think that would be helpful for everybody, especially me. I'm selfish that way.
All right. Let's see. So we can go through, I know everybody probably just got it today. I know many of you probably saw this the other night. So I'll try and balance not, going too slow, but also not zipping through it. And feel free to stop at any point if anybody has questions. Deirdre, do you want to go to the outline slide, the next slide? Thank you. Okay. All right, so what we're going to talk about, what I'll walk through is first outline and explain the utilization of COVID funding that we had in fiscal 21 and fiscal 22. And then outline what positions were used and highlight the few that are actually still in existence and the funding source for those. The vast majority haven't been utilized for the last 2 years. Fiscal 20, well, this year, and they're not in the budget next year. Then we can walk through the components of the $2 million, of the full $2 million shortfall that we have for fiscal 24, and then walking through the mandated positions that we have, that we had to hire this year, and those that are in the budget for next year. As well, there are some additional slides where we break out some of the specifics exactly on the out-of-district tuition increases and how we got from last year to this year, or 23 to 24, in terms of where the increases came from. And then we will look at, again, the elements of what would be the funding request, and then the impact of reductions at multiple levels. Pull this closer. There we go. All right, there we go. Yep, perfect.
And do they have forms? They have forms with 3 members.
So, COVID funding salaries. So we received in fiscal 21, we received a total of $243,000 in COVID funding. 157 of that were salaries, and of which 111,000 were actually short-term substitutes that we needed to utilize when, in the midst of 10-day quarantines, et cetera, people being out, we needed additional substitutes to come in. We only needed those positions during COVID time. All of those positions are not utilized this year and aren't in the budget for next year. We had nurses training, we had some English language gap services, special education gap services. Again, all of the fiscal 21 salaries are not in existence in fiscal 23 and not in the budget for next year. Fiscal 22, we received more in COVID funding. We used $334,000 to fund positions. Some of the largest ones were learning facilitators, which again helped manage classrooms during absences and also try and provide some additional services. We had tiers tutors, custodial support, which we had brought in for additional cleanings, serving that. Out of all of those positions, currently only the custodial support, an SEL teacher, a .6 of English language learning FTE, and our healthcare facilitator remain from those positions. Now, the custodial support, we actually will repurpose those hours to actually clean town buildings as part of the joint agreement. So as part of that agreement, out of the town budget, money was shifted over to the school to cover that. So that's what's funding those positions now. If we weren't doing the work with the town, we wouldn't need those hours, and they would either pick them up over here or they wouldn't be there. The healthcare facilitator actually helps with Medicaid billing and generates the revenue required to cover that salary. So they're still in existence, but there's a different funding source. The social emotional learning teacher that we had, we actually in fiscal '23 shifted that to marijuana impact funding. So in fiscal '23 and fiscal '24, that position is covered, or is planned to be covered by marijuana impact funding. Now, when we get to fiscal '25, or whenever marijuana impact funding goes away, that becomes another element, just like many other uses of our marijuana impact funding, that we're gonna have to figure out what we're doing with it. I think those are, yeah.
Do you know, and so of the 334,000 for salaries in '22, what is the number of positions that are continued in '23?
60, there's 113. Call it 135.
Thank
Which
you.
is the 61,000 of the SEL teacher, 51,000 of custodial support, which is actually 1.8 FTEs, and 22,800 in healthcare facilitator.
Thank you.
And then the remaining 86,000 in each year was used for one-time capital type purchases or uses. So again, in total, over 2 years, we received just under $700,000 in COVID funds. But again, that was 2 years, and other than what I've mentioned, none of it is funded in '23 or in the budget for '24.
Next slide, please.
So then we go to the components of our fiscal '24 shortfall.
Hold on one second.
Oh, sorry.
Deirdre, would you go to the slide, the first slide that's labeled Components of FY '24 Shortfall?
One more slide, please.
There we go.
Perfect.
All right. So on the slide, and I know it's a little busy, but ultimately, we're talking about the column that's fully enclosed in the box is where our deficit is. The reason for the columns over to the side is to highlight really the difference between what was voted at town meeting over the course of last spring and fall, and what is our base budget of where we're starting for. And the difference is recognizing that we had 174,000 in marijuana impact funds, and the one-time funding of 361,000, which covered a majority of what was a sped tuition increase for fiscal '23, which was a $500,000 increase, and there was one-time funds put in. So even though our budget true spend for fiscal '23 is 18,690,147, the calculation of our base budget of where our 4% increase is coming off is the 18,154,000. So our 4% increase on that number is the 726,000, bringing us to 1881. Our budget request is 20,964,080, which is what gets us to just under 2.1 million in shortfall. when we're looking at the components of the $2 million deficit, $1.030 million of it is basically 2 years of sped tuition increases. $361,000 from fiscal '22 to '23, and another $670,000 in fiscal '24. In addition to that, in fiscal '23, in order to accommodate new required services based on individual student IEPs or individual learning plans, and efforts to keep students in district by providing them the additional services they needed with their IEPs, we had $557,000 in hires that we needed in order to comply with the mandated IEPs. In fiscal '24, which are and we'll get to the slide on what comprises the fiscal '23. But in fiscal '24, we have $98,000 of additional new hires in our budget request in order to accommodate out-of-district transportation needs that we have now that we're gonna need for fiscal '24 to transport students out of district who need to go.
Mr. Conroy?
Yep.
Can I ask you to, I want to ask you to back up for 1 second.
Yeah.
I just don't want to get lost, and I apologize, I don't mean to sidetrack you either, or derail you. So on the first components of FY '24 shortfall.
Yep.
The one-time budget plus-up which we all understand, I mean, I clearly understand and remember we voted it, remember we discussed it, $361,000 was added to the budget. It was not intended to be, we knew that likely there would be additional challenges during FY '24, but at that time it was 361. You had just said that 361 was towards a $500,000 sped shortfall in FY '23.
Correct.
And the reason I'm asking is because if you go, what you said was the increase in sped tuition is $1 million, $1.03 million for FY '24.
No, I said it was a 2-year increase.
So is it, thank you, is it 500 each year?
No, what it really was 523 and 670 in '24, so it was really
Okay, to get us-
1.2 million because it was 500 and 670, so 170.
Yeah.
But we had 361,000 of it covered in our budget in one-time funding. So that's not in, so we already had to cover the other 150 last year.
And did the funds that made up the shortfall last year, the 150, did that come out of cuts last year that you took internally from your budget?
No, it came out of us using more circuit breaker than we would normally use in a given year. So we ended up having to use basically cutting our circuit breaker down to a level that leaves about 200,000 left at the end of the year instead of having the full amount that we would normally use for the following year.
Which exacerbated the problem this year.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
may I ask you as far as the tuition money, the 14%? Was that strictly for out-of-district sped?
Yeah.
So it didn't, it wasn't for the
Nope.
IP at the school levels?
Nope.
They didn't get, it was just for?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to be
Yep,
sure of
yep.
that.
Yeah, and because I know some people are probably wondering why, and I think I mentioned this at the select board meeting on Monday. All of the private schools during COVID, what they did with their COVID money, and again, whether they had, whatever, they increased salaries, paid signing bonuses to get staff to stay and commit. They then went to the state when the COVID money ran out and said, in order for us to maintain what we just did, maintain the compensation levels that we just did over these 2 years, we need a 14% increase from in all of our tuitions. And the state said, go right ahead. So, again, going back 2 slides, our COVID money was used in finite periods of time, and when it was gone, it was gone. The 14% increase is to subsidize these institutions who were allowed to just pass the loss of COVID money on to the districts.
Keep going.
All right, so getting down through the sped hires, we also this year, or for fiscal '24, we have a loss in school choice funding available to us, in part because we have lost, we're losing students. Let me rephrase that. We do not have as many school choice students coming into the district in the lower grades as we have graduating. And part of the reason for that is because our Millis student population in the early preschool, kindergarten, first grade, our population is growing. We don't have as much room as, so that is a loss of funding. And I also am going to take a minute to address other concepts that I think may be out there. The $5,000 that we receive in school choice funding is truly 100% upside to the district. We don't have students come in and come in as a choice student if we don't already have room in the grade. They are not causing us to add staff. They are not causing us to have higher utility bills. The building's open, all of our costs are finite. So where our student per pupil spending, whatever it is, 18,000, whatever that number is, in reality, if we didn't have the choice students in that calculation, our per pupil spending would actually be higher. And we wouldn't be getting any money to help offset some of the cost. So school choice for us is truly upside and has actually been one of the factors that has allowed us to carry through over a dozen plus years to help offset when we had to get through times that were leaner. We had school choice funds that had been built up, and we could utilize those, and they helped offset our costs.
Mr. Crowe?
So when you take in a school choice child, say in kindergarten, are you obligated then to keep that child all the way through high school?
They can stay, yeah.
So if your other grades get jammed up, then it isn't really a plus to the town.
The grades won't, generally grades don't get jammed up as you move forward. We don't have a lot of mid-grade, like throughout the school, kids moving into town that cause us to have, we've never had a situation where we've had some influx of students that weren't here from kindergarten that caused us to now be like, oh, we shouldn't have allowed school choice. In reality, what happens is after 8th grade, or sometimes after 6th grade, a certain number of kids leave, and then after 8th grade, a certain number of kids leave for various reasons, to go to different high schools or middle schools, but we've never had that situation.
So we voted last night to maintain the choice district, but it doesn't mean we can close certain grades down. So the administrators will look at certain grades and look at projections. So we may, out of the 12 grades, they may only do 8 or 9, right? And I don't know the exact numbers. But you're voting to be a choice district every year, but then you can pick and choose which grades. So if you see a surge coming through pre-K and to K, you can slow down bringing in choice students for those earlier grades.
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of backtracking about the children with IEPs that are in district. Are they going to be affected by the cuts, or is this?
So the services that we have to provide in the IEPs are legally mandated.
So they will
So the short
still-
answer is, no, they will be they would be the last affected,
Okay,
because we have to provide those services. The reductions that we will make will have impact on,
every other student.
correct.
The one caveat to this, and I've said this, I think, the last time we were here and Monday night, is that in 2023, we have 191 students on IEPs, okay? And that
In
num-
district and out, or?
That's all IEPs, so some are in and some are out. And in fact, the number has been slowly going up. In 2019, it was 165. 2020, it was 163. 160 in '21, this is the year. 2022, 169, and then it went up to 191 in 2023. Some of those kids are in, actually, the majority of them are in district. We in '23, we only have 23 kids out of district. Now.
How many? I'm sorry.
23 are out of district this year, this school year. What happens is, through testing and through classroom observations, certain kids are seen as they're potentially going down, they're having issues and concerns. What we will, if we got to the point of having to meet the whole deficit, we would lose some of that wraparound services for non-IEP kids, right? Because that's what Mr. Conroy said, we have to, that's a mandate. We're gonna potentially lose the ability to keep kids in district. And once again, when they go out of district, that's where the increase, dramatically increase. And also, we feel very strongly that educating our kids in district is the best place for them to be around. So it's a long-winded answer to your question. The direct question is, we have to fund those services. I'm concerned about the
Other
second tier and the third tier
Right.
kids. We're gonna lose the ability to provide them the services that they need.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Garzon?
In your discussions with other school districts, are they also seeing a jump in IEPs in their districts, in similar vein, coming out of COVID?
Yeah, so and Bob pulled this data off of DESI. So in 2019, the state percentage of students on IEPs was 18%. It's up to 19.4 statewide in 2023. We've gone from 13% to 15%.
So above average
Right. So.
jump, okay.
And that's the percent of our population. But in true numbers of students, we had a 13% increase in IEPs from 2022 to 2023.
Right.
And the state percentage is creeping up, so that means, we have not spoken to any of our colleagues, at least on the school committee level, but if the state percentage is going up, and based on the conversations, one would surmise that everyone is seeing, and it's all relative, right? It's
Sure.
relative, but everyone is increasing.
Right, that was my question.
Yeah.
If we're seeing kind of average jumps, that there's a jump for the state, and are we kind of in that average? But it sounds like we're above average in the increase in IEPs, at least what we're seeing this year.
Yeah, if you look at,
I can't give you a definitive answer across the state, but yes.
Yeah.
that's
but the
increasing.
state percentage went from 18 to 19, and we went from 13
Yes.
to 15. So
So that's double.
2 is greater than 1.
Exactly. Thank you.
I'm on school choice now. Is there any other IEP questions or anything before we're back onto school choice?
I don't know, but you are free to ask your question.
It's just, how many do you have for school choice? How many students?
Depends on grades.
No, but
I asked them.
mine's in the back.
We can pull up the,
Actually, I have
Our
it, if I
college.
can go grab. There we go.
65?
Thanks, Rob.
Coming in?
No, 65
Good.
across,
Right now.
across all districts.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, when I saw it last night, 30 of those are in the high school.
So my question was, How many students in Millis are school choice? You said? 65?
That's
Coming in.
it, that's coming in. What
Yeah,
about
are you
going
asking
out?
who's coming in or?
No, no. I'm sorry?
Those are kids that live in other towns that come to Millis.
Yes, 65 of them.
So that, Mark, would you please, since you're at a mic, just repeat that? Not that, no,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
okay.
So there are 65 students who do not live in Millis who are choicing to Millis currently.
Ms. Boyardi?
And how many school choice students do we have that are choicing out of Millis?
We have, yeah, so we've got 27.
Okay.
Thanks.
We're gonna get you a soup
Is-
can and,
Is the amount of cost per student, whether they go out of district or come into our system, the same? Like, does it cost $5,000
Yeah.
to say go out and
Yeah.
$5,000 to come in?
Yep.
So at 27 and you said 65, so, oh, somebody do the math for me.
I don't know.
32 students?
can you,
So truly, it's 32, it's 5,000 times 32 that we're, I mean, 38.
can you clarify that statement that, that it's a net zero, one for one student leaves, one student comes in? I think
No,
I
the
heard you say,
The dollars are the same.
Correct,
If a
but-
student,
but when we lose a student, do we lose Chapter 70 dollars?
our enrollment does, yes.
So it's
gets
not
impacted.
net zero, there's another, the receiving school district receives $5,000, but they also get less state aid. The losing district does.
Yeah.
And frankly, in my opinion, it doesn't matter to this discussion. It is insignificant in the scope of a $2 million deficit, how many students are choicing in and choicing out. But because we're talking about it, I want to make sure we're accurate.
But historically, and it still remains this way, we have more kids coming in than we have kids going out.
Understood.
Mr. Chair, when you, just again, when you say they're going out of Millis, does that mean going to Tri-County, to a private high school, or is it going to another public school?
School choice is another public school. It is not, if a student goes to just the local one, Zavarian, if they go to a private school, that's not school choice.
Thank you.
Public to public.
Right, okay, public to public, there we
Public to
go.
public.
It's just what I wrote. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, Mr. Chair,
Mr. Underhill?
just, back of the envelope math here, I know you're saying it's a small drop in the bucket, but by my math, that's $190,000 that the Millis Schools is taking in. That's 10% of what, that's a good portion of what we're looking for, so that's an important number.
All right. That's, all right. So,
What I'll do going forward is before we move off of a slide, I'll try to ask for questions at the end of each slide. We can go back and forth if we need
We're
to.
here on
but-
your time.
I know. We're here till 10 o'clock time, no problem.
all right.
2 hours, 10 minutes.
Mr. Duffy?
We need to go to 11, we go to 12?
Jim Duffy, 343 Exchange Street. In the interest of clarity and completeness, we lose Chapter 90 funding for kids that go out of district. Do we gain Chapter 90 funding for kids that come?
79.
Chapter 79. Chapter whatever.
To be clear.
As long as it's not Chapter
For different
11, we're all in
clarity's
good shape, so. So anyway, so I didn't hear that piece of, do we gain Chapter 70 money for incoming kids versus I heard losing Chapter 70 money going
I
for
don't,
kids going.
I don't have a definitive answer
Okay.
for you, so I can't.
I don't know exactly how that
Does Mr. Wiggins?
mechanism goes. Yeah, you would.
They're all talking back there, sorry.
We can follow up on that. I think your point of, there's a greater number here that,
Well,
The amount
that's not a universally agreed to concept. It is, in the scope of things, it is 2 faculty members. So
Right.
it's not absolutely insignificant. It is, that
No, but
portion
I'm
of it is
talking
very
about the
consistent.
delta between if we're not, if we're. what
If
we're
you're at
losing
32 or
for seven-
31.
No, if we're losing I think the question was if we're losing chapter 70 money,
Okay.
what that number is.
We can come back to that, or you can email us,
Yes.
and we'll provide the answer.
I think it's rather insignificant.
All right, so moving, we'll move off of this slide. So going to the, expanding on the components, so focusing on the out-of-district tuition shortfall over 2 years. We had, again, impacting this year's budget, we had $361,000. That was from fiscal '22 to '23. The 14% increase on all of our students compounded it another $249,000. We then had a change in students, which was, in reality, a net zero change. We actually had 4 students roll off between aging out or various other reasons, and 4 students coming in. However, the 4 students coming in had a net cost of $200,000 higher than the 4 students who rolled out.
And just to summarize that, all students have, they have different conditions, they need different
Yep.
educational accommodations. They're not all the same cost. It is a variable cost by IEP.
And these are all, this is just the students that are going out of district. So right, it's based on their need, it's based on the school that they have to attend.
And just for example, the highest tuition in FY '24 for one student will be $210,530. And the number 5 on the list, and it goes down, but the number 5 is $146,841. So we've had other cases where they're at 170, 180. So the numbers can be extremely high. And then if they go to a collaborative, it can be lower, but it really is, once again, that's the IEP dictating the placement out of district. It's not our decision. It's a collaborative effort, but it's really the IEP that dictates where they go.
So then the last component is change in services. So we had some students who may have been here for a partial year in fiscal '23, who now we have a full year of tuition. The other thing that can happen is the IEP requirements can change. So they may have one set of services, and over time, those services have to expand. So same student, higher cost because you have new additional services. So that, from fiscal '23 to fiscal '24, is an additional $213,000. So the sum of all those gets us to the $1,030,000 from the other page. And so again, student numbers are the same. Again, our average tuition per student in our budget for fiscal '24 is $99,000. But the actual tuition ranges are literally $11,000 to $211,000. And 17 of our 22, their tuitions exceed $80,000.
Do all students going out of district go to a private educator, private school?
Some go to a collaborative, so like the Accept Collaborative or Tech Collaborative.
Is there any type of like co-op where, say, a neighboring or adjacent nearby district has a service?
So Tech and Accept are actually both collaborative schools that we and many other area towns are members of. So the Tech Collaborative and Accept are basically regionalized schools.
Is their tuition better than private?
Yes.
Yes.
Just point of order, I was writing something down. 17 of 32 students exceed how much?
80,000, and it's
22.
17.
22 exceed.
80,000.
80 grand.
Thank you, that's what I was looking for clarification.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, this is the slide that goes back to the other one, so are we good? Okay.
I don't have any questions.
No, I'm just because you had mentioned you wanted to tie them back.
Mr. Crum?
Is there any effort amongst school districts to get together, talk to the legislature, talk to the governor about fixing this unfunded mandate?
We had meetings, we had joint meetings with two of our elected officials. All of them have received letters, as well as the governor's office. We've received feedback from almost all of them stating, we hear you, we're hearing all of the other districts, we're looking to do something in FY '24. It does not appear that any relief is in sight for this year, meaning they're gonna do work next year for, which will be FY '25.
There actually was an article, and I read it this afternoon, it was published yesterday, on Patch. And it said that there was a meeting of area superintendents that met with various DESI officials. And the article that I read specified Medfield and Medway. And one of my questions was, were we invited? You know, I'm not sure who belongs to that particular association. Was it by invite? Was, you know, I don't know. It's the first time. I was surprised to come across it in my Google search today.
I can clarify that.
Thank you.
For you. I also I have a note that when a kid choices in, when a student choices in, they become part of our count. Therefore, they impact Chapter 70. So they don't separate them out from Chapter 70. So when they come in district, they're part of the Chapter 70 count.
Okay, that's good.
So
Thank you.
so, right, so we're getting 5,000 plus.
Plus whatever the relative Chapter 70 funding is.
Thank you.
So we're not losing money by choice, they're just a regular count.
The other thing to address the question of the trying to change the formulas or get, so the circuit breaker formula has been underfunded. Oh, Deirdre, could you go down the next slide? So currently what the circuit breaker is basically the state's attempt at subsidizing the higher level of costs. Currently, the law is that we will get 75% after a tuition reaches, it's 3 times foundation threshold. So for example, and this is the example up here, and this is just random number, as an example. If we had an individual who had a tuition of $100,000, in fiscal '22, the foundation threshold is $47,363. So until their tuition, someone's tuition hits $47,363, the state, they were not even part of the calculation. Then, so only the amount above, so there's $52,000 that would be qualified as a reimbursable amount. The state then provides 75% of that. So on the $100,000, the state will reimburse us 39, and we in Millis are on for the other 60. That 75% value over time has not always been fully funded at the state level. There are petitions going on right now to bump that to 90%, but this is not a new issue in terms of the lack of circuit breaker impact. It has been something that the legislators and our legislators have known, and cities and towns have talked about for as long as it's been around. It just doesn't get changed. It's much like, you know, our Chapter 70 formula, when the governor puts out, you know, oh, I increased Chapter 70 funding by 10%, and it's $500 million increase, and we're getting an increase of 30,000. Just, it doesn't translate when it goes through the formulas. Again, there's attempts to change the formula to get it to 90. It just.
Not gonna happen this year.
Right.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Crum?
So to qualify for IEP, the student has to reside in Millis, though, correct? We wouldn't have we wouldn't have a choice student come in.
We could have a move-in.
That's not choice, though.
Yeah.
That's not a choice. If
Right.
they move into
Right,
district.
they have to be in district.
Depending on what time of the year,
Mhm.
the cost is either gonna be incurred by us 100% or by the other district. And if they stay in district, the next year, it's gonna be all of us. So yes, and that has happened in the past where you could have a mid-year, it is not unheard of for someone's IEP to change mid-year, or also to have a move-in, and they're going immediately out of district, and we're incurring a $75,000, $100,000, $120,000 cost.
But it wouldn't be for a school choice.
That's right.
Yeah. That's not
Your original
choice.
question.
No, that's not what he's asking. He's
Yeah,
asking,
school
will-
choice.
Could a school choice kid have an IEP? The answer is yes.
Yes?
Yeah,
They
they have an
could.
IEP.
But not an they wouldn't go
Do we
out
qualify
of
that?
district, though.
Do we qualify that before we take a choice?
No.
I mean, they're not in districts, we're not obligated to educate them.
Correct, correct.
So do we do any kind of analysis to determine what this student could potentially impact our system?
I think it would depend on what grade they were coming in and what grade the IEP was determined. So if they came in kindergarten.
Right, I know that you can't
But if
know
we-
what's
but
gonna
if-
happen in the
but if-
future.
But yes, if there was a seventh grader who was coming in, who wanted to choice in, and we didn't have the services, we weren't, like, it would require us to go get additional staff to provide the services. We do not have to take the choice student.
But if we have the services, we do.
We can.
We still have a choice to
If-
refuse?
Yeah, you don't have, you have to apply for school choice.
Well, I know
You
my
can't just
children did
call-
school
you-
choice.
Right, but I mean, the school has to accept you. You can't just call the school and say, I'm showing up because you're a school choice district.
And it wouldn't affect as far as discrimination of any sort? If a child had an IEP, say in seventh grade, and we chose not to accept it?
We're gonna do a little more research on that. I
Yeah.
wanna be clear on that. It's a fair question, it's a reasonable question. I think we know the answer, but we're gonna do the right thing and say, we'll get back to you on that. I don't wanna say something on camera that's not right, or
Right.
puts us in any sort of liability or
Right.
factually wrong.
You're on
Correct.
Facebook, right, Steve?
Sorry.
I'm all about the facts.
I appreciate that.
It's a fair question.
All right, so then moving into the positions that were hired in fiscal '23 to accommodate IEPs. We had a behavioral analysis professional. We had to add a preschool class, so we had a preschool teacher and paraprofessional. We then had 4 other paraprofessionals and bus monitors who were all funded either through going into circuit breaker or fund balances, or basically through the operating budget by instituting a budget freeze on the second day of school. Those positions total $317,000, and then the 2 marijuana impact positions, the positions funded by marijuana impact, were another $143. So the sum of those 2 amounts is the 559.
Can you, I want you to clarify something you just said. You froze your budget when?
Second day of school,
Why?
to make sure we had enough money at the end of the year to not.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right.
We go to the next
Any
slide?
questions on this slide before we go?
So then, in terms of the funding request. So starting from our $2,082,000 deficit, again, if we were able to get the marijuana impact money that we got last year, that would bring us down to $1,009,000. Replacing the one-time money we had, the $361,000, and funding and then finding or utilizing other one-time sources of funding this year to cover our additional sped increase and our mandated hires would bring us to the total of $1.4 million, which is the $1.4 million that we have been talking about since December.
The 361 replacement of that one-time funding,
Yep.
where would that be replaced from?
I will leave that up to.
Okay, so it's not coming out of your 4 or your 6%. It's,
Correct. Well,
it's unfunded.
So the math of it, if we were to get 6% this year, that extra 2% would basically be 360,000.
Okay.
Say that again, please, Mr. Chair.
So the 361 came out of free cash last year. It has not been proposed or voted or otherwise allocated out of an FY '24 budget that I know of. Perhaps it's in, I mean, I have the town's
So it's
budget
out there,
spreadsheet. It's out
unpaid.
there. It's part of a,
Unfunded, unpaid.
it's reducing, this unfunded obligation if it were funded, but it's not funded, so you can't really say it's reducing it. It's, Mr. Schultz,
Just make a
please
point.
step to a mic.
We're trying to help out here because I look at these numbers more often than I care to think. I think that Mark is basing all of the school's numbers on a 4% growth. So the budget growing 4%. So he's got a $2 million deficit if he was awarded 4%. Since we've been talking about a 6% pretty regularly now, that just happens coincidentally, quite coincidentally, to equal 360,000. So that 360,000 would be the additional he'd get if we went to 6%, the school would get if we went to a 6% funding formula instead of a 4%. So the source last year was free cash, the source this year would just be normal budgetary increases at 6%. Does
Mr.
that
Schultz?
clarify? Yeah.
It does, yeah. While you're at the mic, and since I know of no other, and many in this town know of no other that can explain it as good as you, can you please briefly, as you can, go over 4%, the funding model for 4%, and how we use that, how we
Yeah.
derive it?
We looked, well, first off, property taxes go up 2.5% every year. That's the amount that we can collect in excess of the prior year. So if the housing prices double, property tax rate has to fall by half. We can only collect 2.5% more on our existing home taxation. Then we have new growth. New growth goes in on top of that. And then the state gives us, and this is not insignificant, 0.05% increase in their funding. So there's $30,000 you get right there most years. So with all of that, if you run that model out with our new growth estimates, with the 2.5%, the town can typically support a 4% budget growth each year through normal, contractual growth and other things. New growth has been higher than we anticipated when we picked 4%. So there is the opportunity to take that up to a 6% level this year. The 4% was based on a very conservative new growth number. We were assuming 750,000 of new growth. I pulled up my old worksheets. And new growth has been significantly more than that over the last several years. So, and yet we've still held our department growth to about 4% each year. So, so this year can go to 6%. And I think that was a decision that we made early on in the process, to try to help out with some municipal needs and school needs early on the process. So that would replace the 361,000 right there. And that was not the intent when we did it. It just happened that 2% equaled approximately that $360,000.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Before you leave, Mr. Schultz, can you give me the date when everyone decided the 6% from the 4%? Is that on the municipal side also?
It's
Mr.
on both
Chair?
sides. It's on both sides. Both budget, that's the proposal the select board is putting out for the municipal budget and the school budget. That's the amount that we felt our revenue would support.
Mr. Duffy?
Jim Duffy, 343 Exchange. So quick question on this 6%.
Yeah.
Using round numbers, if it's $1,000 this year, it's can't even do the math. But the 6% increase this year, does that now form the basis for an incremental 4% next year? Or is?
That would be a permanent increase.
Yeah, see, I rail against that, just from a compounding, I don't even like 4% personally, because that number adds up pretty quickly over 10 years, right? So I would advocate that we think about a base plus a yearly percentage that doesn't get folded into the dang base budget for next year that compounds everything.
I don't,
Can I just point one thing out?
you may.
Yeah, the school budget, other than SPED, this year was growing at 4%. That's, and the municipal budget, other than some of the additions we put in there for fixing some problems and such, that grows at 4%. We could have both of them grow at 4% based on contracts, basically. Municipal's a little bit squishy this year because we just signed new contracts, but not significantly over 4. But the school has been able to control very close to 4% every year since we put this in, as has municipal. So it's this is a one-time deal.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. McGinnis?
Oh, sorry.
Ms. McGinnis, no, I wasn't.
Well, I keep hearing you, so I want to give you an opportunity to speak, because I'm listening to him and I'm hearing you.
Yeah, I apologize, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair, but all of a sudden, the town came in with 4%, and now all of a sudden, I see 6%, so
We're not going to debate
No,
4
we're
or
not,
6%
we're
right
not,
now.
and
We'll
I
have,
don't
we'll
wanna
have an
hear
opportunity to
anything,
do it
but,
next week or at the select board meeting when they vote the budget on Monday.
You know,
Mr.
with all
Cohn?
due respect, when are we gonna vote on something?
What would
Putting it
you like
off
to
and
vote on
putting-
right now?
I would like to what I would like to do, I would like to, which I think the finance committee, and I'm sorry to digress from your excellent
quite all
presentation,
right.
Mark. I'm so glad that, that you're here to explain this. I personally believe it's the responsibility of the finance committee to calculate the new growth out there. That should be the first thing on the table. How much new growth does the town have to deal with until June 30th? We're hearing from the building department inspector, the DPW, and most importantly, on numerous occasions, the assessor saying building is down. Prices in Glen Ellen, I learned today, are down. It's on Caldwell. The assessor related that they're down $10,000, $12,000. It's the 3 and 4 family units that are going in now. That until we have a number, either on how much we're going to use from stabilization or how much is going to be calculated for new growth, this is just, we're just throwing stuff out there. We don't know.
Well-
And I think we should be I think the finance committee should be the one to say, we are going with new growth in this amount, and we're going with stabilization according to how bond ratings are, and then go from there. Thank
Well,
you.
Okay. I would just respond that we're following the process that we're obligated, our responsibility, our duty is to review the budget that the select board provides in the town warrant. I don't know that there's anything for us to vote on right now. We're getting to a point where the departments have proposed their budgets. The select board is going through its process to put its budget forth, and when we have a budget to vote on, we'll vote on it. As of right now, we have elements of a budget. To my knowledge, there's nothing to vote on. The
Mr.
select
Chair,
board
in-
will vote their budget
Here we go,
on
yes,
Monday.
Yes, and the thing is that in October, the town knew that there was a $500,000 deficit in sped. I want to ask the select board why an override was not projected back then. Knowing that Tri-County was going to be coming in at $800,000 a year, we just signed a feasibility study for the high school. Where's that money? Keep putting it off, okay. Like we said, what are we here for last week?
Okay, Mr. Crum.
I just wanted to point out for those who may be listening and don't know what new growth is. New growth is new construction in the community. It isn't money that comes additionally from existing taxpayers. It's new growth, it's new income that's coming in. So new homes that are being built, new businesses that are being built, that's where new growth comes from.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Conroy, I hope you remembered your place.
I've had some practice, so I'm all right.
All right, thank you.
So, basically, coming down to the 1.4 million that is strictly sped related of the 2 million, still leaves roughly $460,000 of a shortfall that really is comprised of, originally, we had asked, we were planning to ask for, and is in the request, actually an increase in the marijuana impact funding of about $30,000. But we've since learned that marijuana impact funds are probably gonna be flat this year. So that falls. Our loss of school choice funding available of 248, and then the increases in our budget request related to non-salaries gets us about 430 of that, and bringing us down to reductions that will make, even if we were to get the 1.4, which again is just to cover the sped, we will be making reductions of about $500,000, which, and we can go to the next. there we go, which-
Deirdre, can you go back to the bottom of this slide right here? Right there is where I want you to stop.
Bring it up just a little.
Are there questions on this slide?
So basically, the gist of this is, going with the 1.4 million, the district, we will be making reductions to cover all increases not associated with sped.
Okay.
Then if we go to
Next slide.
the next slide, again, to give ranges, if we were to find the funding or have the funding proposed and approved of 1.4 million, it would still, like I said, it would result in a 7 FTE reduction across the district. If I just picked, we got half of the 700, that still leaves us with 1.2. We go to 17, and the whole thing is 27.5. And last night, we reviewed in executive session, because it's still personnel related, every one of the 27.5. They exist, they are there, they will be made. And until we have a number exactly, and to then be able to go through and really finalize what it is, we aren't prepared to talk about what buildings and et cetera, but they're all there.
I do have a little bit of questions. You may not be able to answer them, and I respect that, because I respect that this is difficult for everybody involved, especially those that potentially lose their livelihoods. So that's not lost on whatever words I use, and for my question. And that is, what are the mechanics of cuts? Are they by program? Do you prioritize programs, or are you strictly going off of tenure and seniority and union rules? And let me just add one more thing. I sent you over some data earlier that I saw off of the DESI website on student ratios. I noticed that our student ratios in the high school and the middle school are better than state average. In Clyde Brown, they're slightly not as good as state average. Does that enable you, do you have the ability to focus where you're better than average? We're not looking to be average. Something like this obviously puts that in possibility.
It's difficult because our ratios may be better than state average, but we also have to keep in mind that in the middle school and high school, we have one teacher for each subject for each grade. We don't have duplicative sixth grade. We don't have duplicative. We may have, and when we get to the high school, we have one biology teacher. We have one chemistry teacher.
So are you able to prioritize
So
where
we-
you think cuts
yeah,
best be made?
We will have to go through again, once the number is final, and figure out, again, what, from a programmatic, but also one thing in our contract as well, which is if we have a situation where we have a class size of over 30, we are required to then add additional, we have to add aides into the class. So there is a limit there to where you bump up against that, you're actually end up adding costs. So we're gonna have to go through it all.
So as Mr. Conroy stated, we went through an executive session. Every single position had discussions. It impacts all three schools. It impacts teachers and paras.
At the 7 cut level, all 3 schools?
Yes. Yes, actually, yes. The issue is, it impacts general education, it impacts specials and electives, it impacts, your questions were fair, but it really, without getting into detail, because we are, as Mark says, if you have one teacher doing one thing, if we state that, we're now announcing on,
I understand.
I'm just not prepared to do that. I can confirm, and we can confirm that these are real cuts with real dollars and real positions. It's going to impact all aspects of our learning, and going back, and I've been a broken record on this, but I am also concerned as we get down the list that extra wraparound services, we're gonna lose that, and we are gonna lose kids out of district. And I know every position has a financial impact. Some positions have a further down the road financial impact. We wanna keep kids in district, so any cut that we have to make will be tough. When we start getting into 7s and 14s and 27.5, it is crippling. And as we get closer, we have to be prepared for town meeting, because whatever happens with the Board of Select, or the Select Board's vote on Monday, it's still up to town, right? We still have to be prepared, and we're looking and hoping for an idea, a better idea of what that deficit looks like going into mid-April, because I think I said it at this meeting or there's been a lot of meetings.
Right.
We owe it to our employees, some of them who are residents, that we have to give them some fair warning. We want them to land somewhere else that can hire them. We don't want to lose them, but we also don't want them sitting on the sideline. We want them back into education, so this is the difficult part, but I tell you that the impacts will hit every school.
Mr. Crone?
So in the last few meetings that I've listened to, the inference is that these FTEs will be teachers. But we have admin staff, janitorial staff, we have a variety of you have 212 employees, correct? Or 220, I think was the last
Something
number.
along that line, yes.
Why, I mean, is that inference correct? You don't have a school without educators. I mean, you could have a school without administrators, you could have a school without a lot of things, but you can't have them without educators. So I find it hard to believe that you would pick only teachers.
We were gonna make up our own cuts, some of that 500,000 involves administrator salaries and cost. There's certain positions that we just, I stated here, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we can't let a bus driver go, right? We can't let a van driver go, because if we don't have, we're down to razor thin margins on the buses. We can't run a bus, we can't run school without, 50 kids coming in there. And so we will look at any and all cuts and reductions that are appropriate when we get to that point. So the administrators are touched as well.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Curzon?
I spent some time with your budget this afternoon and spreadsheets, as, super fun time. I'm sure you all have had a lot of fun with it, too. I do have a question. What is ed reform? Like, you
We
use...
have money set aside generally in years for contractual obligations. So in order, the law, the educational reform law says that districts have to negotiate in good faith. So they can't go and sit down and negotiate and then not have money and say, we don't have money to pay for these raises that we just negotiated. So we have to set aside money, and we put a reasonable amount into that fund, so as we have different bargaining units go through and administrator salaries, we have money to meet those obligations.
So it's generally for salaries?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. thank you. You know, you have a very big budget, so.
Yep. Ms. Reyes?
I just had a question. Whatever FTEs you need to let go based on whatever the budget's going to be, how likely is that for you to be able at some point within the coming years get those FTEs back into the school system to make it more of a whole again? Once they're gone, are they probably gone?
Without an override, most
Yes.
likely.
Okay.
When there were reductions made 15 years ago was the last time there were significant, it takes a very long time.
So
Because
this
again,
could,
you look at the mechanics of Prop 2.5 and you look at even our 4% growth. When we have, in general, the revenue of this town goes up 4%. That barely and just basically covers all the contractual obligations for every department every year. So once we don't have excess revenue coming in every month, because otherwise we'd be sitting here every other year.
Right.
Everybody would be talking about, you know, be real easy to hire the 2 new police officers because we'd have, our revenue growth would be so high. We don't, Prop 2.5 doesn't, Prop 2.5 restricts to the point that basically it allows you to continue as you are, and then you have to go to the voters and make the case for adding something new.
that was my next question. All right. And so this could have repercussions further down the line
Yes.
for, say, if an FTE does a particular CP class or something, and now there's no more CP class, a child might want to choice out to a different school that has
Yes.
CP.
Correct.
And then we also now, on top of losing that, teacher will lose that student and the funding that comes with it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Stedman?
Well, you've answered some of the questions that I had posed earlier. I think you've done an outstanding job presenting things. And I've listened to this for the last 2 years. And the problem is SPED. And it's my understanding that SPED is not just the person that we think of that has severe disabilities or something. It's also the gifted students. They also fall under SPED. Is that correct?
No,
Not here? They do in other states.
not here.
Not here? Okay. But that still being the case, it's my understanding, and let me know if this is true, that IED, once it's written, it is an obligation that the only thing you can do as the school board, the select board, or the finance committee then, once that is in writing, is to find the money to fund it. Is that correct?
Yes,
And that's why you use the term mandate.
correct.
So then the whole issue here is the IEDs, what's in them, and the relevance.
IEP, just for everybody
IEPs,
listening,
IEPs.
IEP.
I'm sorry, IEPs.
Too many acronyms.
Yes, too many acronyms, I'm sorry. I used a worse one with my wife the other day. But anyhow, you know, one letter can make a big difference. But anyhow, that's really what's causing all this. So I don't know what the process is and don't want to know the process, but I would encourage you to really look at that process to see that, yeah, every parent wants the best for their kid. Every good educator wants to give the best education. But sometimes there are B+ solutions instead of the A+ solutions. And I encourage you to look at your process to see that you're doing that if you're not already.
Our process is prescribed by law, right?
Yeah, there's still gray areas.
Well, I'm not a special education expert, but here's what I know. Having been in the district for 13
Right.
years, this process is prescribed. There are people that, we have gone downtown, meaning Boston, when there's a discrepancy on either side. I'm not gonna support or say that there's gray areas. We have a very prescribed process, and there's avenues for either side if they have a disagreement. We're not the
Right.
ultimate say. The ultimate say is DESI and downtown.
Right, yeah, the
But we
school
can't
board can't interfere, you can't be involved in it.
That's correct.
But I think that the process has got to be really looking at the whole picture. I mean, it's,
I think
the
that-
student and your people are going to want to do the best.
I think the picture is this slide right here, and that we're only getting 75% above foundation.
Right,
This is the
but-
solution. It's an unfunded mandate. It's not the
But-
mandate. It's the lack of funding and the lack of
That's-
foresight coming from the
That's true.
State House. We
And
need more money.
We can apply
Plain and
pressure,
simple.
but we can't do anything about that. The only thing we can really deal with is that individual case. And that's way different than anything any of us can get involved in.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Or the entire town marches down and actually goes to the state and says something to the governor as a town, and we line up in force. It may not change anything for this year, but it could make some kind of impact. I just think that something more than letters, because they're not listening. But that's not a finance person, that's a parent, that's a grandparent saying, this is ludicrous, to mandate things that put towns out of business, basic school systems out of business.
Mr. Lohr?
Thank you. So for the various solutions, and I might be a little ignorant here, but is there a way to negotiate with unions, the teacher unions, any unions, education unions, where you reduce people's pay by 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever the number is, rather than doing cuts? Is that an option or not?
So we have not gone to the unions to open contracts. We can't force that to happen. And as I said at the select board meeting on Monday, we are looking for a one-time, we're looking to get through this year and address it long-term going forward next year. Is that when we did the override in 2011, it coincided with the cycle of negotiating with the teachers union. And in order to support or to show kind of them putting in, they took a 0% for the first year of that contract, coinciding with the override, to show some goodwill and faith and hope that it passed. The override still failed, but our teachers have, and again, the contracts that we have and that we have negotiated over the last 12 years, quite frankly, have fallen in the 4 to 5% threshold, which is more than sustainable as a district. So, again, we have a funding problem. I think we need to get through this year, and then next year we have we need to come up with a longer-term solution.
Mr. Lohr?
Just a couple more questions. Thank you for that. So, understanding that we're going through the thick of it right now, and there's going to be a solution of some kind, whether it's the best solution, a worse solution, whatever it might be, once we get through this pain point, what are we going to do for our fiscal year 2025? Because we're going to be in the same situation in fiscal year 2025, right?
The most likely scenario is some type of, some sized override to get this. Now, there are going to be multiple factors that play into what that number ultimately is. And that's, again, another reason why getting through this year. But, if there is changes at the state formula for 25, if they do come in by July 31st and come up with some number to get us, to support us through next year, then we'll have an idea as we go through really the early fall as to what is FY '25 going to look like.
Yeah.
And, again, I understand the process, and votes have to be taken and proposals have to be made. But if we got 6% this year put into the budget,
Yeah.
This 1.5 is, we're basically starting at $1 million. Hopefully the state comes through and helps bring that down. But there will come a point where the town's not going to have we can't have this size. We're not gonna be in a situation where we have as much in stabilization. We're not gonna have a situation where the free cash is as high as it's been the last few years. There's just not gonna be a well to go to.
Yeah, and then last question and a couple points. So I imagine the 14% increase isn't going away at all, right?
You would think that because historically, those tuitions have only gone up 1% to 2% every year.
And,
I
right.
would, I don't know, I would like to think that this was a one-time, that the increase was a one-time to make up for their COVID funding, and that it will go back down to a
Oh, okay.
normal, rational.
So it's not set going forward necessarily?
Right. So
Okay.
I would, and especially with the legislator getting the pushback by every city and town on the impact this 14% had, that they won't allow it again.
That was my next point. So Millis is going through a pain point right now. I imagine almost all towns are going through the exact same thing.
Correct.
Everyone.
And the question is, to Joyce's point, is how can towns, districts get together to help get back on track talking to the state? I don't know what that answer is, but rather than marching down, but how can school committees work with,
I suspect, and we've been focused on us right now.
Yep, of course.
I suspect that almost every committee is probably sending some semblance of the letter that we sent to all of our elected officials in the governor's office.
Yeah.
I think that helped. I mean, we can do some inquiries, but I'd be surprised if they're not having meetings and sending letters like we've done. We started our conversations in January, so we were not waiting on this. One of the reasons why we waited on the letter was we wanted to see what the impact was. We wanted to be able to provide meaningful and not just say the sky's falling. It is, but we wanted to know what that number was gonna look like.
Thank you.
Mr. Cron?
The reality really isn't subject to interpretation, although some people think it is, but it isn't. And the reality is that this is gonna be ongoing. It's not going away. And the other reality is that if you went to town meeting last fall, if you looked at what happened in Newton, and the fact that you have to build a new high school at some point, very soon, an override is unlikely. And like any organization, and I know you guys have the brilliance in it to do it, but, you know, looking at it from zero next year, you know, just look at it completely from zero. What can we do if we don't get the override? I mean, that has to be a consideration, because it's not passing in a lot of cities and towns right now. And, you know, coming back here next year, as you said, where's the money gonna be? It's not gonna come from the town.
If we can't, I would also correct that, it's not a definitive by any means that we're building a new high school. We have $8 to $12 million worth of repairs. We looked for a renovation and addition. So there's no guarantee. We're going into the feasibility study. That is a process that will dictate what we're going to do. And then the town will have a vote on how we proceed. I just, because there's a lot of talk out there that we're building a new school, I just want to clarify that. That was not the intent of the school committee in applying for an MSBA grant. It was to get funding for our infrastructure that needs to be repaired. And they're gonna look at it, and we have space issues as well, so. That's aside. The other piece is, if the override doesn't pass and we're faced with this thing, then we're talking more cuts. I mean, I understand what you're asking. It doesn't go away that if there are 10 new kids in SPED next year and it's 30 plus, we have to pay for those services.
Right.
And if we don't get money from the state or from the town, we're making more cuts. And we will then lose kids to other districts. We will not have people move into town. I'm trying not to get there, but your question puts me in the position to say, it's not like we can say we're not gonna send the kids out of district.
No, my point isn't so much that, you know, we understand, you know, there aren't gonna be sources of income coming in because we'd like them to. But also, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to cut teachers. That there are a lot of other things, if you started from zero and looked at, do we need this program? Do we need this? Do we need this? Do we need this? You know, what are we doing from zero? You know, there's a lot of creep in every budget. You know, this school system is 140 years old. you know, and things go on from year to year to year and continue. And a lot of organizations are like that, but some organizations sometimes just have to step back and say, okay, it's not working anymore, we can't continue to do this. No one wants to see the teachers cut, no one. I'm a kid of public schools, my grandkids are gonna start the public schools here, no one wants to see that. You know, we'd all wanna do anything we can, but we're at 1850 1,000 in taxes right now, you know?
I believe 88% of our, I've said that a lot, Mr. Chair.
You're right.
I think anywhere from 85 to 88%, I'll give myself a little edge, is salary. So
That's people.
that's people.
Right,
So the creep,
but if you get rid of a program, you don't necessarily need some of those people. And I can't tell you what programs, please, I'm not that person. I'm not pretending to be the person that can tell you what to do here. But sometimes, some towns have gotten rid of school buses in the morning. I mean, towns have thought of different ways to fix this so that they don't lose teachers. I don't know that you can. I know you'll do your best to try it, but I think the reality is that it's probably gonna come down to a situation in which this continued increase in sped is gonna burden this school as much as it does any other school, perhaps more. Because we don't have a base of taxation significantly other than homes.
Right.
And because of that, the taxpayer is at 18 or 1850 1,000 now. And it goes to 19 and then 20, and at some point, people just move out. And what you end up getting is a new community of different things. So, you know, I don't have the answers. I'm just saying, and I'm happy to help in any way possible, but there's a likelihood that we're not gonna get any more funding, either from the state or from the town in years to come. And I know you know that, but I think that really is the reality going forward.
and we're just looking to get through this year, and we'll start thinking about, it's like the Macy's Day Parade.
Yeah, June
As
1.
soon as we get through, we'll start looking at next year.
That's all we can ask. That's all we can ask.
Ms. Boyardi?
Hopefully, it's my last question, but you know me, I always come up with something else. I know it's a discussion once you guys decide on what the budget's going to be, and that you don't have the hard dollars amounts or who's going to be cut or anything like that at this present moment. And I know that the teachers have to talk through the union, but have the teachers romanced the idea of taking pay cuts?
We're not gonna open contracts at this point.
I don't mean open contracts.
That's
I'm
the only way to
asking.
do it.
No, I would have
That's
to.
the only way to do it.
That's the only way.
and
So
would
they
have to agree to it.
haven't talked amongst themselves to say, hey, so that we
I
don't
don't know
have.
what they've done. We're not going,
Okay.
this has been asked multiple times, we're not going to them to ask them to open their contracts.
Okay. Any more questions? I think that kind of the some may say, why are we talking philosophically? But I actually think that the philosophical or kind of the open-ended discussion is important to have because it gives us context more than just dollars and figures, because there are far-reaching implications for all of the options and proposals that are out there. And until we have the proposal of what the suggested cuts are gonna be, how many of the resources get allocated to the school so that they know, are they cutting 7? Are they cutting 17? Are they cutting something in between? Are they cutting 27? These are the discussions that I think will form the basis for committee member votes. I did read, I just want another article today, a news article from WBUR, says, Bill Bell, Chief Financial Officer of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, said Healy's state budget bill offers $20 million in relief to help districts deal with the jump in special ed costs. Healy also filed a mid-year spending bill on March 17th, so that's in addition to the original budget that was proposed, that would put another $75 million on the table, which Bell said would provide a contingent reserve if districts need more than annual state budget provides. I don't know how that will go. It is not it does not solve our immediate problem in no way, shape, or form. It's impossible. It's
That 20 million, so we'll get our 2, and then nine other districts.
correct. It's
I'll let
actually
you figure that out.
75 million, bunch of districts. There is something to be aware of, though, that the governor's budget was greatly increased for education in the state. It was not greatly increased for towns like us. We are a small town. We do not see the plus up in dollars And so that is a huge reason why we're in part in this situation. So I am done. I want to say thank you very much for humoring us, and
In the
they're welcome.
meantime, can I ask the, either the town administrator or the finance director to come up and speak about the municipal staff in 2020 that accepted, opened up union negotiations and accepted a cut in pay of 4 hours a week, and I believe that was 5 months. And was that done during negotiations, or?
So we will get to that. Not right now, we won't.
Okay.
Mr. Conroy,
Any questions
Mr.
you guys have, please let us know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, her question's legitimate.
Still waiting for a staffing history.
Loves to spray on women.
All men do.
Okay, we are now going to go to our next agenda item, and that is town meeting warrant article review.
Well, everybody leave. Another thing the selectmen didn't do.
Do you need to adjourn?
I'm going to adjourn the select board.
The select board meeting is, they've adjourned. Mr. Kaczynski, as you go through this, I think we'll also have a discussion as to what items, if any, are ready to be voted. And what, if they're not ready to be voted, other than budget, which is obvious is not ready to be voted, what more do you think? Because we need to start voting positions on some of these things. I think we've heard all we're going to hear on some of these articles. We can have discussion, or we can prepare for that discussion next week. Next week's meeting is relatively light. It's with the Capital Planning Committee. There may be a few other cats and dogs. Capital could be dead on arrival. I don't know. We'll find more of that out perhaps on Monday, but, so, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as far as the framework and the articles in the annual town meeting warrant, I think we're about 95% complete. Having said that, some of the underlying numbers and some of the particular items still I would not recommend you go forward with tonight. I know the select board is meeting Monday. They will be looking at certain ones of these articles and discussing numbers associated with that. So I'd be happy to go through. Did everyone get the updated draft? I think Deirdre would have sent it out to everyone. Yes.
The dated one? What date is on it?
Is it? Is it the one that was emailed?
Maybe the new
She
IT
made us
guy
a
can.
copy of one
can
today, right?
hit,
Oh, is that draft? Yes, the draft one, this one?
Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
Really need the date.
So the first article,
Okay, quiet, please.
is really unchanged. It's the unpaid bills. We will be putting those numbers in there, and I would say by your meeting next week, we should have those numbers included in there for your review. Article 2, the finance director and I are working on the operating expenses. Should be able to give you an update on that next week at your meeting. Article 3, obviously, is the general operating budget, and I know you've been looking at all those numbers over the past couple of months. We will provide an update on that subsequent to the select board meeting on Monday as well. And was mentioned earlier, I do expect the select board to have their final budget proposal completed by next Monday evening. So you will get a package of a budget proposal next Monday. Article 4, again, unchanged.
Excuse me, Mike, can I, Chair? Certainly. Is this common? I've never seen this in a town meeting before, to ratify a union contract.
It's technically required under state law.
Is it now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, boy,
What happens if they don't?
that's a can of worms.
It is a can of worms. If town meeting doesn't approve it, you basically go back and have to
Negotiate.
sit down and start negotiating again. I've been fortunate that I've never had to do that in my career, but I know in some towns it has happened. So that's required for municipal contracts, not for school contracts, but for municipal contracts, it's required.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Underhill?
Mr. Kaczynski, you are going to provide copies of the contracts for us before we vote on recommending?
Yes, those should have gone out, and if you haven't received those, I will follow up on that.
I need to check my email
Okay.
closely.
Did no one receive those?
That's old.
They
I
might
think it
be.
was a
I
while
think it was a
ago.
couple weeks ago.
Deirdre?
Yeah.
So if everybody would, hold on one second. Deirdre? Do you,
Okay, my apologies.
Yeah, they're here.
please don't.
Thank you, Deirdre,
But,
I'll
yeah,
find it.
but so those should show what the changes are to the prior contracts as far as percent increases and different adjustments to those agreements. So if anyone has any questions on those, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions? So
And
the
feel free
contracts
if-
are available, take a review,
Yeah.
and we will be voting them, the contracts are available. If you need a hard copy and you don't want to print it on your own, let me know, and I will, by exception, request Deirdre to provide them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Articles 5, 6, and 7, again, part of the overall budget on the enterprise funds. Article 8, I do expect, just to let you know, the select board approved a 2% COLA for the schedule for non-union employees under Article 8. And I do expect to be able to provide you a list of proposed changes to Schedule C for your meeting next week. Now, most of those changes that you'll be seeing are really just to bring the personnel plan in line with, some of the minimum standards in the contracts, just so we don't have our few non-union people fall too far behind. The rest, I don't know if there's any questions on the rest of the consent article. Those are standard items that we see every year. For the Board of Health, the revolving funds, and the Community Preservation Fund. Article 9 is a new article. This was requested by the Community Preservation Committee and the Oak Grove Farm. This is a Oak Grove Farm Trail Improvement Project, which will be funded by Community Preservation Funds. And I believe they did do a presentation. Did they do a presentation to the committee already?
Yes,
Okay.
and they voted.
Yeah.
Not to us.
Not to us.
Oh, I thought you meant the
I
CPC.
said certainly if you want to invite them in, I encourage you to do that at your next meeting if you have any questions for them.
Deirdre, would you add them to the next meeting as well as, there's an energy-related one that Mr. Gibbons presented to the select board. I think that's
Yeah,
number 13. Would
Yeah,
you
sure.
invite Mr. Gibbons to come before us next week as well?
Yeah, it's your
Or
call.
whomever from the Energy Committee, Mr. White.
It's your call on whether to have Oak Grove Farm here. That's the most used trail, and it doesn't affect the budget because it's coming out of CPC, so I'm not sure it's worth our time to bring them in. That's just my opinion.
We're going to vote it. If they want to delegate to a member that may also be here at the same time or is knowledgeable, that's up to them, but I want to invite them.
Okay, your call.
It can be 5 minutes.
Article 10 is the capital article, Mr. Chairman. As was touched upon earlier this evening, considering the financial situation we find ourselves in, I don't expect there to be extensive capital items on this list. I know the Capital Planning Committee is finalizing its work tomorrow evening. The Select Board will be discussing capital items at their meeting Monday. Hopefully, we'll have a list of what capital items the Select Board would like to be considered for you at your meeting next week.
Not hopefully, please have.
It's my intention to have that for you next week. Let's see, Article 11, that is not an actual money article, it's an authorization article. So any funding for buses would have to come within the school budget. But because it's a lease, it's technically a borrowing, it requires a 2/3 vote of the town meeting to authorize the school to do that. So that's simply an authorization article.
So unless the budget is before us, really, we don't know that the budget would include it or not include it.
I
so
do
we
not.
couldn't- shouldn't-
I've
we
had
should
some-
not have voted now.
I have preliminary discussions with the business director of the school, who indicated that there may be a need for some type of authorization. So we can try to get, an updated information in regards to that for your next meeting. But I would defer to the schools for the specifics on that.
Same thing with the police cruiser.
Yes, same thing. That's not a funding article, that's just an authorization, borrowing authorization article. Article 13, I just do want to point out in Article 13, as was mentioned, that's submitted by the Energy Committee for Millis Net Zero goal. That language in there will change. We've gotten some updated language from the Energy Committee, so just put a note that language in there will change. So I'll submit that to the committee. I'll try to get that out to you tomorrow through Deirdre. Article 14, I believe you discussed earlier this evening. Article 15, unemployment.
I'm just gonna stop you for 1 second. So we won't vote it tonight, but Article 14, if anybody has, I fully intend to vote it next week, and if anybody has any issues or questions, concerns, please get them to me by Friday so that we can request and address, be prepared to do that on Wednesday. So I would need to forward questions or invite people or include in the agenda anybody that we want to, before we vote that Article 14. So unless I hear anything, my intent is to vote Article 14 and as many of these other ones that we can.
Tonight or next week?
Next week.
Mr. Chairman, Article 15 for the Unemployment Insurance Fund. Tentatively, the Finance Director and I are recommending that $25,000 to be put into that fund. We do believe with that addition of funds, we should at least be able to get through to the fall town meeting, should we need additional funds there. So that's the dollar amount that's currently being considered.
What was the dollar, 25?
25,000.
Okay, thank you.
Article 16, the other post-employment benefits. That is standard article for the annual town meeting. I don't at this point expect to be any funds put into that at the spring town meeting for obvious reasons. Article 17, I don't know if there's any follow-up questions on that, to establish a special education stabilization fund.
Would the, sorry to back you up, if Article 16 is $0, would the article be removed, or you still have to vote it?
We don't have to, so that could be discussed with the select board on Monday and whether or not that'll be removed.
Ms. Garzon?
We keep punting this article, as we have for many years. Would it be possible to get some information on how much we actually spend on other post-employment benefits a year?
Yeah, I certainly work with the finance director to pull that information together. Most of that is retiree health insurance, is probably 90% of that.
Understood. I think it would be useful to know how much we actually spend, how much is coming out of our budget every
The
year.
last couple of years and what we've actually spent.
Exactly.
Sure, we could
That'd be
look into
helpful.
that.
Thank you.
And lastly, Mr. Chairs, will not funding this, Mr. Kaczynski, affect at all the auditor and the bond rating? And he's always pushing that at every presentation to the select board.
Certainly, if we're able to put funds in it, it's helpful, at least on a periodic basis. I think if we don't put funds in the spring, I would definitely look to try to put some funds in the fall, so at least once a year to try to put funds into it. I think it is something we have to keep a watch on, because as other communities, depending on their financial health, are able to put more and more into it, it'll put pressure on those that haven't put as much into it. So it's definitely something we have to keep an eye on.
Thank you.
I don't know if there's any questions on the next article.
There is.
Okay.
So I need to know who you would recommend to come to us and tell us what this is all about. I mean, I've had one discussion with Select Board Member Schultz, who, we can invite him, or if there's somebody else, whether it's you or
I
Ms.
would think the
Johnston.
most expert person in the town is sitting in the back of the room.
Okay.
Special education.
Oh, 17, okay.
If there's any questions, they might have a few questions in
So-
regards to it.
Not now. I would actually like, we'll put you on the agenda specifically to give us the rundown on this, pros, cons, background, you know, the usual.
Yeah.
Educate us, because it's new.
Yeah. I will just touch upon a couple things that stick out of my mind from looking at the legislation. It does limit the amount that a town can put into it to 2% of the net school spending of the local school. In our case, that would be about $320,000. That's the most we can put into that specific account. And it's the purpose of the fund is to address unexpected, unbudgeted special education costs that occurred during the year. So and it's because of the rise in costs of special education and the unpredictability of children moving in or out of districts, and to be able to manage that. So, but that's the Reader's Digest version. There is a lot of further details that I'm sure we could talk about, but I think those are the things I would just want to mention tonight. The last item, the stabilization fund. Again, you know, they'll be discussed at the selectmen's meeting on Monday, but again, considering the situation, not hopeful that we'll be actually putting money into the fund this spring. Just to let you know, I haven't been adding the petition article, the full language, because I've been advised by town council that I have to put the entire script of the petition in, and it's probably about 3 or 4 pages. So I'm gonna wait till late, but I'm sure everyone has a copy of the actual petition.
Sounds like Mr. Lohr is actually volunteering to take that article on. I think I heard him say.
If
Just to have a
anyone,
nice voice,
And that
okay,
took
you.
lots of
No need to recite it, just refer to the book.
any volunteers want to come in and retype it on the draft warrant, I would appreciate it. Gonna set aside a little time for that.
I'll type it.
So those are the articles. For those that are paying close attention, you'll notice that 2 articles are no longer there. The select board at their meeting on Monday removed design and construction of sidewalks and roads and tree removal and maintenance, because just as you mentioned with OPEB, there's really not much hope that we'll be putting any funds in the spring. You know, we're gonna take a look at our free cash for many of these items in the fall, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of make up for, you know, the issues of the spring in regards to these items, so.
Just to clarify a bit, because this question was asked, I think during a select board meeting, the sidewalks and trees were removed because there's likely, very likely, no available funds in FY '24. Funds approved in FY '23, there's no reason known or anticipated or expected at all that those wouldn't be executed very soon.
That's correct.
So we're talking 2 separate issues.
Yes.
This would be for really next fiscal year's projects, which could potentially not even get started until sometime in calendar year '25.
Correct, and there's some of those funds that were set aside at the fall town meeting that you won't see in physical action until May, June, July, just because of the time it takes to line these things up and get
It's
the
a bit of a
work done.
nuance that for those that don't do this every week or every budget cycle, they hear, oh, we just removed sidewalks and trees. We removed it from this town meeting, this warrant, and it could get future consideration at a fall town meeting, and anything that was previously voted and appropriated is on track to be executed. So just for the general viewing audience.
Mr. Chair? So for our next meeting, I have a feeling we're going to talk about stabilization a fair amount. So if we could get the 5% calculation based on our projected FY '24 budget as to what we would need stabilization to be at and what it actually is right now, because I know that the earnings have kind of fallen off. Like the fund has actually shrunk just based on earnings. So it would be helpful to have that so we know what our delta is from 5% versus actual.
Hi. So,
Carol Johnson,
Carol
Town
Johnston,
Budget Director.
Finance Director. Sorry about that.
Finance Director, thank you.
Finance
You're fine.
Director, okay. So, As far as it stands right now, the amount that you show on your meeting agenda is the correct amount that we have, the balance that we have in there. Projected out for the '24 budget, we would need $10,000 more than what we currently have in the fund. But as you said, as you stated, every month is pretty volatile for the investments. So we have actually pretty much had net zero earnings for the year. We put $300,000 in the fall, remember?
Yeah.
So now we're at a $10,000 deficit.
Okay.
But hopefully, the next 3 months, the measurement date for the stabilization policy is June 30th. So we'd have to find out what our balance is at June 30th, close of business for the FY. So by the fall, we would know.
Okay.
For the fall town meeting, and stipulated in the policy that we would have to review it, and if needed to, fund it in the fall town meeting.
Okay, you don't have a crystal ball as to where the earnings are gonna be, in June?
I
Because
don't.
I'd like to make some investments.
I know, really, tell us.
I don't know if we have any financial advisors.
I think it would tell you
on
that
the
if you're
board
only down
or,
10K on a $300,000 investment, you've actually done pretty good. That's not bad.
Okay, fair enough. So knowing that it's down about 10,000, but, so we'll see kind of where the select board is recommending we, pull funds from to meet our budget obligations
Right.
for FY '24. So
Right.
that'll help inform us with our stabilization policy next meeting as well.
Right.
And just so everyone's aware, if we're not adding to stabilization, we're supposed to be putting it in OPEB. That's part of the
That is
stabilization
part of the
fund policy.
stabilization policy.
So,
Yes.
all of these are germane discussions as to, what we're supposed to be doing and what we can actually do.
Right.
So now that everybody has a copy in their hands, a copy of the stabilization fund policy, we can discuss it a little bit further, but I will tell you that you now have it. Please study it, and I will keep it on the agenda for next week as well, just in case there's any questions. And there there will be implications that will happen as a result of that could happen, I don't know, likely, but plausibly they could happen as a result of the select board's meeting on Monday, that we should be very familiar with this. So, does anybody have any comments or questions on stabilization now, beyond what we just discussed? Okay, so Deirdre, we'll keep that on for next week as well. And we won't need 15 minutes, but anyway. Okay, let's see. Warrant article discussion is actually on there twice, I think. So we just finished that. Any board and committee liaison updates?
Before that, can I just ask the town
Certainly.
administrator a few questions? May I, Mr. Chair?
It depends. So you may ask your question, but whether I ask him to answer it, because I want, let me just.
Let me ask the question,
Sure,
and then you
sure.
can, could you please remind the citizens about the municipal staff that accepted a cut in pay of 4 hours a week for 5 months in 20 or 21 or so?
Sure.
Hold on.
If you'd like me to.
I don't want you to, because, so Kathy has forwarded a number of questions and requests for documents and things like that. Included in those are like 10 years of budget contracts or employment personnel contracts for the school, for the finance department, 5 years of data for the enterprise
It
fund.
wasn't the finance department, it was the municipal department,
Okay.
schools and
Okay.
municipal.
Forgive me. We do not have time, and I personally am failing to see the purpose of reviewing 10 years or having an agenda item, because I was asked to put them on the agenda and it said a 10-year review of personnel contracts. And there was more specific than that, but it was not specific enough that I was compelled to add it to tonight's agenda. First off, the request was late to me. What I asked you to do was formulate specific questions so that I could craft the agenda and ensure that we gave it the time. I have no doubt that you have information that you would like to know, and I think that, I'm aware that you've asked the school committee and others for information, and I believe they've either provided it to you or directed you to where you can get it. If what I asked for is your help to refine your request so that we can put it on the agenda at the appropriate point, I do not understand why having a review of the town employees cutting back hours is germane. I'm not sure what that is germane to on our current agenda tonight. We are held to discussing what is on the agenda, and I have some discretion to allow or disallow. I'm not saying that we won't, I just want you to help me get it to a point where it's refined, because 10 years of documents, of contracts, is too broad.
So 5, Mr. Chair. I want to.
It's not the year. What
No,
is the
let me
po-
just say.
Help me.
Last week, I asked our finance director for this information, which I stated to you. Again, I don't even receive an acknowledgement that I have sent emails. Does anybody here send emails? I know Jim McKay answers does anybody else get answers from anyone when you send an email?
So is the issue?
The issue is, Mr. Chair, it's last in, first out. There has been such an expansion of staff because the money is coming in. So let's see where this expansion was, Mr. Chair, to find out if we roll back.
Okay, but that's not on the agenda for tonight. So help me put an agenda item on there.
I asked you for it because why aren't my emails going through you? I
have your email, and I responded to it.
Why hasn't
I don't know,
the
but that
town-
can be an agenda item if you'd like to. We can add an agenda item as to why our emails don't get answered.
If
I don't know.
If the town administrator is here, why can't they just tell me why they haven't acknowledged out of courtesy a receipt? That's all.
Mr. Kaczynski. The specific question that was just asked is, why haven't you at least acknowledged a question or a request out of courtesy?
A week ago,
Do you remember what day you sent the?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. I can't recall. I will say that.
No, went to the finance director, which I was
No,
told
I'm not
to
saying,
ask.
I'm not saying it, I'm,
No problem answering this question. No problem at all.
This is somebody.
Last Wednesday, March 22nd, there was a budget workshop being held from 9 to noon with or 10 with the select board. 15 minutes before the budget workshop, I get an email from Ms. McGinnis. All things pertaining to committees are supposed to go through their chair. They are not supposed to come directly from the committee member to myself or to Mr. Kaczynski, because it's supposed to go from chair to chair, and then the chair directs us what we're supposed to do. The request that she put through was totally an unreasonable request dictated for a very short amount of time. She wanted all information for all employees within the town from 2013 to that day, March 22nd, that she wanted their name, their job description, how much they were paid, what accounts, jail accounts were they paid from.
Hire
what
dates.
Hire date. She wanted all the benefits that they were paid or were provided to them for all employees from 2013 forward. Now, that information, first of all, is not currently available in that form. Second of all, that information annually is published from 2016 to the present in the town report. And how it is provided is by department with the teacher's or person's job title, with the amount of their base, with their overtime, if they're paid other, and detail, and a total amount is paid there. So all of that information is currently available from 2016.
In alphabetical order, not by date of hire.
No, it is by job description. It is by school department. If
Right.
you list it,
Yeah,
it
I
is
saw it
very
all.
clear where all of that information is. So also, I was out last Thursday and Friday, so to be able to respond to your email, plus be here for the Finance Committee meeting last Wednesday, was a little unreasonable. And I think that if somebody's going to ask something, the preferred method, and I believe it's the authorized method, is you go to your chair goes to the select board chair, and then the request is passed on.
Yeah, if I could just add, I mean, from my office, and Carol did forward the email to me, but I didn't have a chance to talk to her until Monday in regards to it. Monday was quite a busy day. We were getting ready for the select board meeting Monday night. And I was gonna respond on Tuesday, and the town clerk informed me that Ms. McGinnis had withdrawn her request on Tuesday, so that's why I ended up never responding.
No, I was told, Mr. Chair, that to ask for freedom of information, and that's what I filed with the town clerk. And then on reflection, thinking that it would be coming without having to go through a finance committee member asking. And if I remember correctly, we don't go through the chair to ask questions. I've always been under the assumption that if you have a question, you go to the person. It's new to me to go to a figurehead of a committee or a department where it could get lost. Who would know that, oh, I didn't get it? So I was always taught that you go through the, you go to the staff. So
Well,
I
as-
apologize for not, I didn't know that there was a procedure that you go to the, but I now realize that,
So-
Mr. Chair.
Have they sufficiently answered
No.
your latest question,
No.
which is why they didn't answer the email?
Oh, yes, that, but
Okay.
I.
So
I'll
in terms
reformat
of,
my questions.
I am not aware of the documents that have been requested, other than what I was made aware on Monday prior to the select board meeting. That was when I don't have the request. I don't believe I'm courtesy copied on the request, so whether she's required to or not to come through me, I wasn't aware of the original request. Nonetheless, I fail to see the value added of having that discussion of those documents in our finance committee meeting. And until I'm compelled with information that is somewhat actionable for me to put on, what am I gonna put on an agenda of 10 years worth of documents? I mean, are we gonna have a 15-minute discussion on 10 years worth of documents?
Just see
Because
the
we
line going up,
don't
Mr.
want the
Chair.
documents.
Just see the line going up of the spending, no control.
So what do you want me to put on the agenda? Which
Well,
is,
I
I'm
think-
happy
I
to
think
put
it's a-
something on the
I
agenda.
get that, Mr.
May
Chair.
may I finish, please? Because I don't think I've interrupted you. But I'm happy to put something on the agenda, and I've asked you to help me refine the purpose of the discussion so that I can put it on the agenda. I don't think anybody in the history of, well, I think I've been very fair to provide everybody an opportunity to speak their mind, ask the questions that they want asked, and the really thing that I try to clamp down on is to make sure that people are civil and conduct themselves with the appropriate level of decorum. Beyond that, we've gone all over the place with our questions and comments tonight, and I have no problem with it whatsoever. But a list of 8 items, some of which are 10 years worth of documents, I don't know what I would put on the agenda, and I need your help. And I'm happy, if you want to do that, you have to get it on next week's agenda. You will have to do that by Friday, because that's when we post the agenda for the following week's meeting.
There's been discussion, and it was at the tri-board meeting specifically, that at some point you have to come up with kind of like a zero, will the municipality be responsible also for any cuts that have to come for the school? Is it shared?
It's up to the select board.
Mr. Chairman, can I just, not to address this specific topic, but the process issue, if I may, just to clarify process.
Sure.
So, the finance director and I are very busy this time of year. We have a lot going on. We're trying to respond to the requests from the select board, requests from the finance committee. I know that an issue came up, maybe it was 3, 4, 5 years ago, that I think a member had requested some information and it was provided, but then it never got to the other members of the committee, and there was some people upset about that. So from a process standpoint, I mean, certainly any individual as a citizen can come and ask under the public records law for a piece of information. If the document exists, we have 10 days to produce it and provide it. If it's a research project, if it's something that's gonna take considerable time, and if it's from the finance committee, if the committee is requesting the information, the finance director and I, to try to assist the committee in its work, will work as hard as we can within our constraints to try to provide that. But individual requests from individual members, we have to treat as a general public records request unless it's from the committee. So that's from a process issue. We had established that a number of years ago. And, you know, if the finance committee wants to discuss that and help give us some further direction or talk to the select board, we'd be happy to do that. But we just, because of, you know, we're running in circles this time of year. This is our busiest time of year. So I just want to make sure if we're spending time on like projects to pull information together, it's on behalf of the committee. So that's all, and that really, you know, and I would say the same thing for any other board or committee that's asking us for information. We'd want to know if that was a request of the committee or a request of an individual on the committee, because it does make a difference on priority and how much time we can expend on it. So.
Thank you. Ms. Boyardi.
Just for clarifications, though, if we have an article, if we're assigned an article, do we still go through you if we need to ask the department head or the person who's pertaining to the article? Do we still have to go through the chair to then go to, say I had an article that affected, that you knew information about?
Ms. Garzon.
So I'd like to point us all to our policies and procedures that we implemented in 2021. Please review them. I wrote it all out. That when it comes to warrant articles, there's a procedure. When it comes to general requests, there's a procedure. And, you know, we've run into this in other times that it gets chaotic, and we want to avoid the chaos. We want everyone to have the information that they need in order to make appropriate recommendations for all the warrant articles. So it's on our Finance Committee page. There's policies and procedures adopted April 14th, 2021.
By vote. By vote.
By vote, review it, but, you know, we also need to be sensitive to the amount of information requests that are coming. When it comes to warrant articles, as I recall, the procedure is if we make a request in a meeting, then it's noted in the notes. Deirdre often helps us with, you know, the information that we've requested to come, you know, when it supports a warrant article. When it comes to more broad information, like I just asked about stabilization funds, you know, sometimes, you know, it may be a specific question like that.
I've made a note. So typically, when we ask for things,
Thank you, Jody.
I will follow up with a note that will go to Deirdre, and Deirdre will forward the request from me to the responsible department.
But when we're emailing requests, it should go to the chair. The chair will pass on the request to other chairs.
Right, that's the only time we kind of automatically consider it from the committee if it's from the chair. The chair contacts us and says that the finance committee would like this information, then we converse back and forth with the chair as to what can be reasonably provided within a period of time. And so I think that's a good process, and make sure that, you know, that we're providing centralized information for the whole committee that the committee feels is pertinent to your decision-making during the course of the budget season.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jody.
Okay. Okay, so it looks like we're, board and committee liaisons, that's where we were. I don't intend to rehatch the entire select board meeting on Monday. There were 4 of us, maybe 5 of us, because maybe Mr. Stedman was on without me knowing.
I was on.
Were you on? Okay, so sometimes when there's.
Watch TV, I watch on TV.
On TV, okay, so that's different. Were you on TV or Zoom?
Zoom.
Okay, so sometimes when it's tiled, sometimes when it's tiled, we don't see the full name, and I couldn't figure out if we had 5 or not. So there wasn't any discussion amongst us, so I'm fine there. But anyway, so the select board meeting on Monday. Anybody want to recap that? It's all a blur at this
Well,
point.
it's pretty much what we heard tonight.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same
We had the
presentation
same-
as tonight,
correct.
only on TV you couldn't read it,
Yeah.
so.
Remind us what they voted on.
The only other thing that was presented was the petition woman.
Oh, yeah.
The
Correct.
citizens petition.
Correct.
And she came and presented in a shorter.
And the bag, they had the bag.
Mhm,
Yeah,
that
in
was
the
a good
bag.
It's all a matter of record anyway.
But it was
so.
everything
Okay.
that was discussed this evening, except for the petition woman wasn't here
Okay,
tonight.
okay. Anything noteworthy on CPC or other CPC?
Just what was last week, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right, we're done with board and committee liaison updates. There was a school committee meeting on Tuesday, which I actually forgot to go to. I think there wasn't much noteworthy actually discussed in terms of some of the bigger looming issues that we have before us. I don't think that those were discussed in substance. The previous meeting on the 13th of March was much more noteworthy. And of course, they've had presentations twice this week, so. Okay, there's a couple of documents in your packet. I would just refer you to them. I don't know that we need to discuss them. I'll just tell you that the first one is a letter that we get from the Registry of Deeds every year. It tells us what funds the town will receive into CPA funding, and it really comes from, you didn't get this?
No, I get it as Conservation Commission.
I got
I
it
don't
as
think
a
your
select board.
interpretation is correct.
Yes,
Okay.
I think that's the amount of money they collect. How much the state gives back will not be 100% of that.
So Millis, yeah, you could be right. We do get another letter from them that says how much we receive. So
That's
maybe
right.
I could be, thank you.
That's how much was
Yeah,
collected.
okay, thank you very much. So it will be a pittance portion of that the town will get back.
Probably.
The Tri-County letter, this is, I think they've officially set the rates. I did review
Which is
this.
what's in the budget.
I did review this letter against what's in the budget, and it matches verbatim, so
That's 200 to the
that's a
good.
good news. I was hoping to call Carol up and say, Carol, it's less than what's in the budget. Well, it didn't happen, so. We're not gonna dwell on this. The Finance Committee schedule, the spring schedule, it is now, the final lap of a mile race, the Bell Lap. We've got a lot of work to do. Recommendations, Capital Planning Committee will vote on as many of the issues as we can. Please, if you have schedule conflicts, you can anticipate that we are gonna be voting during the next 2 weeks, and I'd like to have us all here, if possible. And we can vote via Zoom. I will confirm that, if anybody's ill. But the committee chairperson has to be present and can't conduct the meeting over Zoom or the chair. So take some vitamin C this week. Anyway, we have a lot of work to do, and then you can see the milestones that are there. I'll lament that, as usual, town meeting is, actually, it looks like the date is wrong.
It is.
The date is the 3rd, not the 1st.
Yep.
Deirdre, you show that as May 3rd for town meeting?
Oh, wow, yeah.
Okay.
That was not good.
Okay, it's all right. All right.
Well, at least we'd be early.
Yeah, it's multiple spots, no big deal. Typo, but I will lament that most of the work that we'll do for writing up our discussion
Oh, okay.
comments and things will likely be done over spring break, which I know not all of us take or get, but it's just bad timing. So anyway, moving on to minutes.
Actually, I have a question. So I'm inviting someone from the community preservation for next week, energy committee, and we'll review the stabilization fund.
Yeah, Deirdre, I'll talk with you by next week, or excuse me, by Friday, by this week, to give you any inputs that I have for additions. I mean, and the capital planning committee probably won't be a long presentation. There will be capital items. There's some enterprise articles, enterprise expenditures proposed, as well as one, I think, IT from the general fund. Not sure if that'll last. We'll know more on Monday, I suppose. Yeah, I think that's the one. So Oak Grove, John, you were not in favor of having Oak Grove attend?
I think it's pretty straightforward, and I think his name's McBoy.
McAvoy.
Yeah, he's been pretty tied up. So they've gone through at length what they need to do to protect all the wetlands. There was a similar article,
I was gonna say,
last year for a
meeting.
portion of that funding.
Yeah.
But it wasn't enough to really manage the water and get the job done, completely right. And because it doesn't affect the budget, it's the 800,000 that the CPC has, which is taxpayer money, that can only be used for open space, historical, society, or, there are three things.
Senior housing.
Senior housing. It can't be used for maintenance, it can only be used for investment.
I just think, my feeling on it is that we need slightly more than what you just said in order for us to vote it.
Like a plan.
And even if that's a write-up or a,
Well,
and even if it comes for.
Perhaps Mr. Maltinsky will want to come, he's the chair.
Okay, so Deirdre, that will be on there as well, so, okay. There was one other item I forgot. Slipped my mind, okay, I'll think of it. Okay, so now we're on to meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon.
I move we approve the minutes of March 15th as written.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to approve the minutes as written from our March 15th meeting. Discussion? None heard? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
One abstention, I wasn't there, so.
One abstention. Okay? And I did just remember one thing. So Mr. McVeigh told us that they likely won't be able to have Board of Health comment on the citizens petition. I don't think he commented on it on Monday. He shouldn't have if he didn't, because he told us he didn't vote on it. So I'm open to suggestions if we want to get a substitute for that, or whether we think we're ready to vote it for next week. If anybody's uncomfortable voting it, now would be the time to say it.
I just have a question. What is it that she actually wants? I read through everything.
Yeah.
I'm just not really sure what it is that she's trying to get done.
So that was a question that was posed Monday, and that's the only reason I think I have an answer, and that is, the language in it more or less recommends that the town draft a letter, and when I say the town, I'm not sure exactly who, if it's the select board, or if it's the Board of Health, or somebody from town governance forwards a letter to state either legislature or the governor's administration. It is similar to what has been done in many other municipalities across the state. It's not, it's not her, I don't believe, and forgive me, I don't remember her name, it's not her, wordsmithing of a letter that she's come up with. She seems like she's very informed on it, but as she described it, it's a somewhat of a template or a boilerplate letter, which is similar that other towns have sent, basically urging the administration to take action on 5G and perhaps to push the FCC or somebody else to, evaluate and research the technology, because, and I'll leave it at that, because
see if it's
she knows more.
harmful.
Right.
Mr. Chair, we had requested, could someone check back with the planning board to see if they heard back on town council as to his interpretation of it, which I think this finance committee had requested from the planning board, their opinion, and they sent it off. Okay. Whatever good that'll do.
Mr. Chair, I think the problem we have is, we really don't have anybody with a definitive statement as to what would be the consequences of the government actually doing what she's asking them to do. We don't know what it means. We don't have any expertise that's been provided to us that says, this could actually cause 5G to be eliminated in your town or something else. So we really don't know the impact of this letter. I personally, letters like this without a lot of background, I would vote indefinite postponement, but That's just my own opinion on it. I just, you know, I don't think we have enough information to really consider it.
So one thing to keep in mind is that in most instances, citizens petitions typically pass this committee. That's not to say that there's not an opinion that goes with it and a concern potentially raised. But when a citizen's petition comes forward, because they've gone through the steps, it's been certified by the town clerk, there's signatures, et cetera, the process is there so that in some instances, the petition, the subject matter can get through to town meeting, potentially. It's not, I suppose
I mean, it's
it
gonna
is
go to town
binding.
meeting.
It is binding if it passes.
It is binding,
So-
and that's where our recommendation means something. Because it's telling the citizens that we've considered it, but we really haven't, because we don't have any background information on it. It seems, you know, innocuous, I mean, it doesn't seem anything harmful,
Yeah, and
but we don't know.
And also, I need to check this. Obviously, there was a lot of information that was presented, both in writing and otherwise. The citizen petition may actually only recommend that the select board write to the legislature. I need to verify that. I don't
The
know
town
that
of
for certain.
Millis.
Correct. So,
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Arnell?
Granted, I've only been on this committee for about 3 years now, but when was the last time the Finance Committee voted in support of a citizen's petition? Because I can remember 8 that we've recommended dismissal.
Yeah, in recent
So
years.
you say we always vote to approve them, but I can't remember in my time on this committee the last time we recommended approval on a single petition.
The last time they were all withdrawn, so.
Well, but we moved to recommend dismissal on all of them before they were withdrawn. So
Mr.
just,
Chair?
we don't
ahead,
rubber
Jay.
stamp them.
I mean, I always appreciate when citizens come forth and do the work to put something on the warrant. I appreciate all the work that goes into it. What always drives me crazy is having to revise things like we're doing with the plastic bag ban because the language wasn't tight enough or specific enough. And the thing that the issue that I have with the way that this is written is it's not specific. It references that requesting the town of Millis to write a letter to various folks, but in what capacity? The town administrator, the select board, finance committee, who?
Who are they writing?
And then what it actually references isn't specific enough. You know, requesting that the FCC address the 2021 court ruling. Well,
what is that?
which court ruling?
I know.
I mean.
It's an appellate court, there's still more to
There's
go.
yeah, right. So, I mean, I appreciate there's a lot of work here. I have trouble supporting vague language, because we are saying that we support this. I personally don't know enough about 5G and what this is, you know, requesting.
We've actually gone to 8G now.
Yeah.
So
You know.
it's almost a moot point.
So I have trouble supporting the petition because of the vagueness of the language.
I agree with Mr. Cronin. I don't know enough about it to really put my name on endorsing it, nor do I think it's appropriate that a citizen petition require or recommend the town do something, especially if it isn't the select board do it. So I think it's an inappropriate citizens petition. So I can't support it.
That's
So-
why,
so
Mr.
the
Chair, you
question-
hope for there would be
Right.
town council review.
So, again,
Yeah.
we'll vote it next week. If anybody has any requests on who they would like to help us make our decision, per the discussion we just had,
Mr.
you
Chair,
know,
I mean,
let me know.
none of us have enough information
Or knowledge.
and based on that, it would make sense to dismiss it unless
Well,
we do our due diligence.
You can make your argument next week.
I
but if
know.
there's-
I don't want to.
Recommend to
I
dismiss.
agree. I agree, definitely.
There's nobody that could come here and, in a reasonable amount of time, educate us on it and give us all the information so we could make
Well,
an
essentially, we've
informed
heard-
decision to back it.
We have heard advocacy for it.
Yes.
We have not heard anybody speak against it. So perhaps, you know, that's what would help us form our opinion.
And we cannot touch any of the language in the petition.
Right.
Which is why voting on it is, send it to town, make a recommendation that we don't like it. I mean, I don't know how, you know, what else is there besides a vote to dismiss?
Well, do you do
There's
dismiss
a no,
or do you, or do you?
a
do-
recommended dismissal.
I mean,
Recommended,
so you don't
no
do
vote.
indefinite postponement?
No.
Okay.
We try to keep the language simple. We had a problem at last town meeting where we weren't clear on what we
Definitely
recommended. It was a
never been
debacle.
clear.
Got burned on that one.
That was also
was wrong.
100% my responsibility, so.
Ooh, yeah.
It was a motion to defer,
I
actually.
didn't know what the hell it was, and I'm a
Get your
motion
facts right.
Poor Brutus.
I think you have to approve the other meeting minutes, isn't there two?
I didn't see us.
I just saw the one.
There is 15 and 22nd, let's say
Maybe she
15.
didn't give us.
Deirdre, did you include in our packet the,
Mr. Duffy has stayed through the whole thing.
okay, all right, we'll defer that, thank you, no problem. You may if you'd step to a mic. This is Lisa Harden, the town clerk.
Walnut Street.
Lisa Harden, the town clerk. Just in general, when the town of Millis is asked to do something, it's usually the select board, because they're the only ones that represent the town. So,
The executives.
just for future reference. And also, I don't think any of us are ever going to know enough about 5G to know what to do about it. It's my understanding, it's just my opinion from listening, that they're asking somebody at the state level to look into the ramifications of it, and are there any health problems from it, because nothing's really been studied in 30 years. They're not asking us to decide anything personally about 5G. That's just
All right.
my opinion.
So my homework or my ask is that everybody read it. I have not read it. And,
I read
you know,
it.
use a red pen and
I think she's right.
Just be
It's
I went deeper
basically
into
what it
this
is.
thing than I
It's,
ever
you know,
wanted to.
recommending that
I
they look at it,
researched the
whatever.
backup data.
I
It's,
did too, yeah. I
ugh.
did search the-
I will take a motion.
Well, why not make them look at it, seeing that they're doing this
Mr. Duffy.
mandate?
Before we adjourn, I have a couple of questions and comments.
Microphone.
You can sit, you can stand.
Wanted to get in under the wire. Jim Duffy, 343 Exchange. So 5G will cook your Thanksgiving turkey in sufficient concentrations, of which we typically are not exposed to those concentrations. But anyway, it's microwave, so. Anyway, last year, I requested details, a lot of details. And I'm hoping that this year, when it comes down to the final discussions, we get the nitty-gritty details, the links to them, right? I really appreciate tonight's meeting where you could link on what the hell it is, excuse me, what it is we're talking about, right? So as we get through that.
Thank you, Deirdre.
I advocate that. And I don't know if it's this committee's or the select board's, I'll ask. My opinion and my request would be we get a web area on our town website where all of the documents relating to town meeting start to get posted, including all the budgets. And I don't know if you guys have the line item details behind this, or I'll get it from Mr. Gazinski, but I can't, it's not on the website. And I think there's gonna be, I expect a sort of contentious town meeting this time around. And I think the better educated and the details that people have coming to it, the better. It's gonna be contentious one way or another, that's my opinion.
Mr.
So-
Chair,
Ms. Carzon?
on the Finance Committee website, Deirdre has posted a link to all of the FY '24 budgets.
Oh, that's awesome.
So,
He just made his
she's
point.
amazing.
Who says the town moves slow?
Finance committee.
She keeps us very
But there's
organized.
a $14 click fee. So
That's okay. Fine with that.
you
That's
gotta
it.
get the money first.
Thank you very much.
It's cash now, though.
All right.
Thank you
No,
for
it's
keeping
Thanks,
us
Jim.
on track.
It's Venmo.
You know, Mr. Chair, I will say, you know, getting a budget of that magnitude, a matter of hours before our meeting was really unreasonable. You know, I worked today, I tried to read as much as I could. It was in 15, 20
Yeah, I
different
couldn't,
sections.
yeah. I was at a
You know,
meeting all
it
day.
was really, this budget should have been presented to us in one form or another a month ago. And I, you know,
Well, you in fact have not been presented the school budget.
Exactly.
And that was by choice, in the sense that the school budget is, I mean, it is substantial. We,
Two-thirds of our budget.
we opted to dig into the issues of the cuts, the potential cuts and the shortfall, more so than the budget. We had a meeting at the school board on the 13th where they presented their budget. We didn't discuss it, and we certainly can discuss this in more detail if desired. We are going to vote on whatever budget comes to us. I think they have given their budget to the select board. Once the select board votes the budget and it is a proposal, then that would be the opportunity for us to, another opportunity for us to go further into it, into further detail. So if you want to crack this open,
I mean, look, I
and
don't
go
want-
page by page.
I don't want to go page by page, but I think when we ask questions, you know, I wouldn't ask a question if I know the answer's in the pages. And I think to get it that late, you know, we couldn't know what questions we could ask if we didn't digest some of
Yeah,
it, you
yes,
know?
yeah.
We got the executive summary, but that's, again, what they want to present to us. You know, whether or not there's $1 million in cuts anywhere else in that budget, and there may not be, but we wouldn't have known other than 10 o'clock this morning. So, you know, I would have liked to have seen at least something prior to this, you know, so we have some background on it. And I've listened to the meetings too, and I appreciate what you're saying, definitely, but I've never seen a budget come out this late from, you know, from 65% of the town revenue, you know, this late. And I don't know what the reason for that is, but I can surmise. Anyway, I'm fine. I just, you know,
Everything's
Are you?
would have liked to have seen it a little earlier.
Agreed.
I haven't looked at it because I was
And-
in meetings all
Unless there is, so I'm not the senior person on this committee. Unless there is radical change, it has been this way almost every year.
Has it?
Now, maybe not, you know, maybe the paper's not still warm some years. But the budgets are always late. Or later than we would like them.
Right.
Even a weekend would have been nice.
Yeah.
I really think that the municipal departments get their budgets on time in.
Yeah.
It's a school.
It's not
But
hard
we
to.
don't get revenue.
It's not
so
hard to
you
put
can't really
a,
put them in context.
it's not hard to put a, relatively, it's not as hard to put together a $50,000 budget as opposed to a, you know,
2 million.
9 million, 10 million, 20 million, 20
We
million
don't
budget.
20 million. 20
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Moved and second to adjourn. All those in favor, say
Aye.
aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, you're
Where's the smart money going?